Hello, everybody. I am just getting ready. Let me know if you guys can hear me. I'm new to this. Can y'all hear me? Can y'all see me? Last time I did this without Dorsey, our brilliant producer, it was hilarious because I was up in the camera's face not knowing what was going on. So I'm hoping this looks better. Let's give it a second to see. All good. All right. Popcorn ready. I'm loving it. Okay. So I am starting this new thing, I guess. We should have started it earlier, but we are going to be covering debates as often as possible in key Senate races and key races across the country from now until Election Day, because things are just too close, as you all know. And we had a team meeting today, and everybody's on board with this. Not only are we going to be covering the big debate tomorrow between Senator Kamala Harris, and Vice President Mike Pence at a very unusual time. I hope Pence gets tested again, because what we're seeing is that it takes sometimes a few times, 4 to 5 times, before they test positive. But not only are we going to be covering that tomorrow night, we're going to have a great show. We're going to have some California consultants on. I figured we'd bring some real brain trust, folks that we may not always agree with on issues, but know a lot about the process in California, who've run races in California, know a lot about Kamala. That's kind of the perspective I was looking to bring in. And I'm going to look for a couple more guests as well. I think it's going to be a really interesting show. You're likely not to see anything like it. Definitely not on YouTube right now. So what we want to do is bring you these debates, which for the most part, people are watching in their states, maybe. And because the stakes are so high, especially for the Senate right now, it's something I think a lot of folks want to watch, and we like watching debates. I mean, I watched the Markey. I watched a few of the debates in Massachusetts between Markey and Joe Kennedy, and they were interesting. I also am a debate junkie. I think this is like totally up my alley. I was in Sedona yesterday. I was in Phoenix over the weekend, and I saw the Trump supporters. I saw the conspiracy theorists who are organizing on the ground there. And, while the polls are all over the place, it's very hard to say right now how much of that is real support. Partly because the polls right now show that Mark Kelly, who, if you guys don't remember, is the husband of Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. Gabrielle Giffords was shot almost 10 years ago, about 9 years ago, in Arizona. This was around the time of the Tea Party. This was pre-QAnon, very, very early stage of this type of movement. But, this type of right wing, these attacks have existed for decades, even maybe over decades, over a century. And that you always have conspiracy theorists, people who might be a little bit unwell, targeting lawmakers for whatever reasons. And there was a mass shooting, actually not too far from my grandparents' house, just down the street, less than a mile away, at a Safeway parking lot in Tucson, Arizona, on the northwest side of Tucson, Arizona. And that is where Gabrielle Giffords was shot point blank. She survived. Many of her staffers did not, I think 3 if I recall. And she stayed in office for a little bit longer. But there were always rumors that Mark Kelly, her husband, who is an astronaut, that he was going to run for something. And sure enough, whether he was convinced or he thought of it himself, he is running for Senate now. And he is leading Martha McSally, who is from the same district in Tucson, Arizona. She represented that district after Gabrielle Giffords left office. There were several races in a row. Gabrielle Giffords' aide, Ron Barber, won in a special election after her race, and then in a general election against Martha McSally. But then Martha McSally ran again, and she ended up taking that seat. Then she later ran against Kyrsten Sinema. Kyrsten Sinema, of course, is the former congresswoman who once was labeled as a progressive, is now a blue dog in Arizona. Once she got elected to Congress, she moved further and further to the right. And then she assumed office in the Senate, beating Martha McSally. But there have been 2 vacancies in Arizona in the last few years. from Senator Kyle, who was a longtime senator in Arizona, who decided to step down, and then, of course, Senator John McCain, who 2 years ago died while in office, a little under 2 years, I believe. And so McSally was appointed. Now here's the big, the big moment, right? Arizona is, all eyes are on Arizona. It is a state that Democrats have thought for a long time they could turn. I worked on a race in 2006 in Arizona. It was a coordinated campaign in which it was a great year for Democrats, which is what people are thinking is going to happen this year. Republicans' all-time low approval rating in 2006. We were in the middle of the Iraq War, and Democrats took the House. And with that, Arizona actually turned blue. We had a Democratic governor in Arizona. At that time, it was Janet Napolitano. And then, of course, President Obama appointed Janet Napolitano to be the head of Homeland Security. And then the office was taken over, the governor's office was taken over by not just Republicans, but crazy Republicans. So there's a certain level of crazy that exists in the Arizona Republican Party, but it's not all of the Republican Party. And I think that's a very important thing to think about moving in. We're 2 minutes away before this debate starts, but there are more independents registered than Democrats and Republicans in Arizona. This year could be seismic. 80% of Democrats vote early, and 80% of Arizonans who vote early because they've had early voting for a long time. So I think it's just, you can go to a polling site and vote early. Actually, I don't know if it's a polling site. I think it's a location you have to go to. You can vote in person. You can vote by mail. They're used to this. And there is a Republican governor and legislature, and they still are able to trust mail-in voting. Isn't that funny? So Arizona has been in the mix for a long time. There's a large Latino population, of course, and there are immigration issues. There's a lot of gerrymandering in this state, and I think Senator Schumer has thought when he looks at these races, it's important to find centrist blue dog Democrats. I don't buy that argument, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. I am going to get this stream going. In 56 seconds, they're going live, so I'm going to start to share my screen. If you guys can tell me in my chat if it's working, please do. It would be great. All right. Let's see. They're streaming it on Facebook. Bear with me. Going live in 0 seconds, they say. Let's see if this works. All right. How's that chat going? I'm looking on my phone, guys. Okay, they say it's going live. Let me refresh the page. So just while we're sitting here, I want to tease out that if you guys remember Green Shirt Guy, Google that when you get a chance. He is going to be joining us later after the debate. He is an Arizona activist. He's a well-known Arizona activist, and he's a friend. He's based in Tucson, and he is going to be joining us for some analysis, and I'm really, really excited about that. Here we go. I think this is working now. Super excited. You're definitely going to hear his analysis. He knows like every little detail of Democratic politics, but he's a progressive. When he went viral, I loved it because at that time, centrists were so excited about him.
I'm Alberto Rios. I'm American, Mexican.
Mute that ad for a second. So at that time, he went viral for laughing at, the right-wing the Trumpers who showed up at a conversation with city government about immigration. So, oh, look at all of these. You can see all my messages. I'm going to change that up so you guys can't see that. All right. Do we have to...
We're...
a critical battleground state. We see that as our mission and mandate to expand the electorate.
Thank you, Jess, for the love.
Transform our state.
I'm hoping I get to all of
Wednesday
your
night at 8
comments
on Arizona
tonight.
PBS.
We will try our best. All right, what is going on here? They're just feeding us a bunch of commercials. Give me 1 second, y'all. I'm not used to doing this through Facebook, but they're making us do it through Facebook. But luckily, they're going to have a bunch of speeches, a bunch of introductions, so it gives us a second. It says it's going live. Okay, we're on it. Plans to go live. Huh. I wonder if Arizona PBS knows how to go live. That's the question. All right, luckily we have another way of doing this. I have backup. So give me 1 second, y'all. Give me 1 second while I figure this out. See, Dorsey is our brilliant producer, but it is late on the East Coast. So thank you all on the East Coast for tuning in. You are rock stars. Now, I think the question is, can we watch it this way? Maybe not. So just while we're doing this, right now, Kelly is up around 11 to 13% as of yesterday. There was a poll conducted October 1st through 3rd, the Siena College New York Times poll. He's up by 11%, and then a Morning Consult poll, which is a little less reliable, he's up by 13%. So, you know, interesting stuff here. All right. Here we go.
But that's counterfeit. Look, the truth is, bought and paid for by Chuck Schumer, whose path to power goes through Arizona. And he sold out to China in multiple business arrangements on his path to get rich quick. And he led over the last decade one of the most radical political organizations in modern history, raising over $57 million in order to help elect some of the most extreme left-wing politicians in power right now. This election is going to decide the Senate majority and the direction of the country. And you've got a choice here, a fighter who's got results for Arizona or a counterfeit who you can't afford.
Senator, Mr. Kelly, we're going to have you respond. You had 45 seconds to respond to what the senator said, and then 90 seconds for your answer on how the administration has handled the pandemic. Well, it didn't take long for the senator to attack my patriotism. She did that last election cycle with Senator Sinema. So, you know, I thought after 2 years we'd see a different Senator McSally, but the same Senator McSally has shown up. Hey, I'm a combat veteran. I served in the United States Navy for 25 years. I spent 15 years at NASA. I served in the Western Pacific aboard an aircraft carrier dealing with the Chinese directly. You know, Senator McSally likes to make false and outlandish accusations. But we've got a serious crisis on our hands. We've got a public health crisis, which spurred an economic crisis. And both of these things have been made worse by a crisis of leadership. You know, over and over again, we have been a step behind. We shut down the economy, and then the administration and Senator McSally didn't come up with a plan on what to do next. Okay, now, but I do want to get back to now, in more detail, how you think the administration could have handled the pandemic better, because we hear from Republicans and the president and the White House that they've done just a great job at this. Well, I think 200,000 dead Americans is evidence that we did not do, that Washington, this administration and Senator McSally did not do a great job. We have 4% of the world's population. We have 21% of the deaths from COVID-19. If you go back to February, the administration knew that this virus was deadly and it was airborne. Senator McSally said she was briefed on this at some point, whether it was in last week in January, early February. Senator McSally told people to go on spring break. And then, shortly after that, when it was recommended that large gatherings like fundraisers be canceled, Senator McSally did a large fundraiser. And when infection rates were on the rise, you know, Senator McSally goes to a big political rally. That's not leadership. We need independent leadership focused on solving this hard problem. And it's challenging, but if we listen to the public health officials and don't ignore the science, we can beat this. All right, Senator McSally, response, please.
Well, I appreciate that at the end of January, the president made a decisive action in order to stop travel from China, something that was highly criticized. Make no mistake, I mean, mistakes were made at all levels, but we're in this together as Americans, and we should be looking forward and debriefing along the way, and we have learned a lot. But this virus came from China. They silenced doctors, they destroyed samples, they blamed it on the U.S. Army, and we need to hold China accountable. And while I'm standing up to China to hold them accountable, my opponent, starting in 2003, while he was serving in the U.S. Navy, went over to China on an all-expense-paid junket by the Communist Party and to help influence, really, elites in America. And he went back in 2004, back in 2005, said it was the most meaningful thing in his life besides going to space. This is a part of what China does. They try to influence the elite, and it seems to work. We'll talk more about that in the follow-on.
Senator McSally, at what point were you briefed on this virus? When was the first time you were briefed on it, and what did you do with that information?
Well, the task force was created, and we've had multiple briefings, as everybody has throughout it. And I'll tell you, Dr. Fauci and others, they were sharing information. Still, we didn't know because China covered this up. It's a new virus, the novel virus. And so their advice at the time was the risk is low. And we learned a lot. Remember, at the same time frame, Nancy Pelosi was telling people to go celebrate the Chinese New Year in Chinatown, and Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden were having rallies. So really, I think for the scientists, it was around mid-March that they were realizing the impact when the stay-at-home orders started. But President Trump took action in January, and that was highly criticized. Mark, do you agree with the president's decision to ban travel from China?
Yes, but Senator, you would understand this as a pilot. You guys did step one of the emergency procedure, and then you didn't do anything else. And that is a colossal failure. When the president thanked China on behalf of the American people in January, Senator McSally stood up and did nothing. We have 4% of the world's population. We have 21% the deaths from COVID-19, and it's because this administration didn't handle this as a public health issue. They dismiss the scientists. Senator McSally doesn't, I can't think of one occasion where Senator McSally has stood up when the president has made a mistake or the governor has did something that wasn't exactly right. That's not leadership. We need independent leadership focused on solving hard problems, not somebody who's just going to stand there when the leader of a political party is clearly making some mistakes.
And Senator, when the president did call this a hoax, when he did say it would be magically gone by summer and these sorts of things, did you publicly say anything in response to that?
What I was doing at the time was fighting tirelessly to get relief to Arizonans, and we passed the CARES Act. We've got the PPP loans out there that saved 85,000 small businesses in Arizona and 1 million jobs. And again, it's just another example of Counterfeit Kelly. He criticized the PPP loan, said it wasn't working, while his company was secretly getting the loan and taking advantage of it. And we passed that relief to stimulus checks and families who were struggling, families in my community, and investing in the treatments and the testing and the cures. Get that relief out the door to have people hang on. And we voted on some additional target relief a few weeks ago. Support to schools, to be able to get kids back to school safely, more support to small businesses. And unfortunately, my opponent says he would have blocked that relief. What was wrong with that bill, Mark, that you wouldn't support this targeted relief to help Arizonans?
That piece of legislation was even the president commented that it was too stingy. And now we're in a situation where Mitch McConnell sent everybody home, 4 separate vacations since we wound up in this situation without further relief. We have 420,000 Arizonans who have lost their jobs through no fault of their own and now unemployed, and they're trying to get by on $240 of unemployment insurance a week. And Senator McSally went on vacation. That's not leadership. We need independent leadership putting Arizona first, not more of the same from Washington, D.C.
We're going to get to Arizona's economy in a minute, but first, let's move on to the Supreme Court. And this first question goes to you, Mr. Kelly. Again, you'll have 90 seconds. President Trump recently nominated Judge Amy Coney Barrett for the Supreme Court. Do you support the Senate moving forward on her nomination or any other nomination in the weeks before the election?
I do not. But let me first say that when Justice Ginsburg passed It was a tough day for our country, for me personally, especially for my wife, Gabby. I mean, she looked up to her as a hero. We're less than 30 days away from an election. This should be given some thoughtful consideration. I think the next president, regardless of who it is, whether it's re-election of President Trump or Vice President Biden winning the presidency and whoever is elected to the Senate, this decision should wait till January. This is a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court. And to rush it through, I think it's really important to recognize, why is this being rushed through right now? And the reason is there's a Supreme Court case in November that's about the Affordable Care Act. And Senator McSally has worked incredibly hard over the last 5 years to eliminate or undermine protections for pre-existing conditions through legislation. That didn't work. She paved the way for this lawsuit that's going to be heard on November 10th, I think. And that lawsuit would take away those protections for 2.8 million Arizonans, potentially. 1 million would probably lose their insurance. The other 1.8, it could start costing a lot more. That's not the leadership we need in Washington, D.C. right now. And you got to wonder why. You know, we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but Senator McSally takes an enormous amount of corporate PAC money into her campaign. When I announced on the first day of my campaign, I announced that I'm not going to take $1 of corporate PAC money.
Senator McSally, we'll go for 45 seconds for a rebuttal. Did you vote to take away funding for pre-existing conditions?
Of course I didn't, and I hope we have more time to talk about this. I will always protect people with pre-existing conditions, and Democrats and Republicans agree about that. But about the Supreme Court, the Constitution is the guide. And this is not about Amy Coney Barrett, who's an amazing role model, top of her field, the first woman with school-age children who will be on the Supreme Court. Let's be clear. The Constitution says that the president gets to nominate and the Senate gets to confirm. And all 19 times in history, when the party has been the same, they have moved forward with that. But what the left wants, what Counterfeit Kelly wants, is to delay this so that they can get liberal activist judges on the bench. When they don't get their way at the ballot box, they want to take away your freedoms from activist judges who legislate from the bench. We're one vote away from, it's a case called Heller, from losing our individual right to bear arms, our Second Amendment rights. We're one vote away. If you look at actually what happened, this actually took away the ability for those in Nevada to go to church while they could still go to casinos during the lockdowns. Our freedoms are at stake. And Joe Biden won't even release his list of who he would nominate to the Supreme Court. I'd like to know if Mark would call on Joe Biden to release that list. And I'd also like to know, you don't get to pick the timing, Mark. Would you vote for Judge Amy Coney Barrett?
Well, we are 30 days away from an election, inside of 30 days, and I trust Arizonans to be able to make a choice as to who their next president is and who they're going to elect to the United States Senate. And to rush through this nomination under these circumstances just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We've got 420,000 Arizonans right now who are unemployed through no fault of their own and are trying to get by on $240 a week. Why isn't the United States Senate dealing with that? That's my question to Senator McSally. Instead, this is a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court. It should take some thoughtful consideration. And I think the voters deserve to have a say as to who is going to nominate the next Supreme Court justice to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Mark, this is just another example where you're not answering the question. Another example of trying to say basically nothing to get elected. But you know right well, the winner of this race could be seated right away, as early as November. So you don't get to decide the timing. You just get to decide what your vote is. Would you vote yes or no on Judge Barrett?
Well, I said I would vote no. This should wait.
Okay.
This should wait until January,
would not confirm
when we have a new president and a new Senate. We're within 30 days of the election, and Senator McSally wants to rush through a lifetime appointment. And the reason is, it's this case about pre-existing conditions and the Affordable Care Act, which through legislation, even after voting 4 times to undermine or eliminate those protections for pre-existing conditions, that didn't work. So now this is Senator McSally's option to be successful in the project she's been working on for 5 years. We have 2.8 million Arizonans who have a pre-existing health care condition, and some of them could lose their health insurance because of this.
Mr. Kelly, if you are in fact elected, because the seat replaces the late John McCain, you could be sworn in as soon as the votes are certified. If you are in the Senate, would you support a filibuster to delay the nomination?
Well, this whole thing indicates how broken Washington is. the discussion of the filibuster, an old Senate rule. By the way, I think it's important for everybody to understand that when it came to passing a $1.9 trillion tax cut for the wealthiest Americans and big corporations that Senator McSally voted for in 2017, the Senate was okay to go to 50 votes, so they abolished the filibuster for that. They also abolished the filibuster to try to eliminate the Affordable Care Act and those protections for pre-existing conditions. Senator McSally was okay with that too. Hey, if this comes up as a discussion, if I'm elected to the United States Senate, I will give it thoughtful consideration, and I'm going to do what's in the best interest of Arizona and our country, not what's in the best interest of one political party or the other.
Mr. Kelly, you've been a candidate for more than a year. Many people think that you should already have an answer to that question. Why would you not? Would you be able to hit the ground running on day one if you're still thinking about something
Absolutely.
like the filibuster?
I mean, we don't know if this is going to come up for even a discussion. It might, and if it does, I will give it thoughtful consideration, and I will do what's in the best interest of Arizona and Arizonans and the best interest of our country, and not the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. And I think it's important to note, very important to note, that parties aren't in power for very long, traditionally, right? It goes from one party to the other. And whatever decision is made on this you're going to have to live with it from being on the other side. And I understand that, and I will give this thoughtful consideration in a way that, not what is in the best interest for Democrats or what's in the best interest for Republicans, what's in the best interest of Arizona.
And real quickly, Senator McSally, I think voters want to hear why it is not hypocritical for Republicans to go ahead with this during the last year of a term for President Trump when they blocked the nomination in the last year for President Obama.
The Constitution is the guide, and the precedent is that in the 10 times in history, all 29 times in history, an opening happened during an election year. All 29 times the president nominated. But when the parties were different, the 10 times, then they didn't get advice and consent. But when the parties are the same, in those 19 times, they all moved forward. Again, this is about, they want stall tactics in order to get their liberal activist judges on the bench, and they want to pack the court. The fact that Counterfeit Kelly can't even answer the question, would he vote for Chuck Schumer? Of course he'll vote for Chuck Schumer. He's Chuck Schumer's star recruit. He's poured tens of millions of dollars into this race, and he said this week, we're not going to waste this majority if we get it. They're going to abolish the filibuster. He just won't answer honestly to you, Arizona. He's saying one thing here in Arizona, but he just can't because Chuck Schumer is trying to buy this election, and you're going to stop that from happening.
I have a question, Mr. Kelly. Who do you need to hear from to form an opinion on the filibuster question?
I'll need to hear an opinion from Arizonans. And when I make that decision, I will let Arizonans know. This is something that might not even come up for discussion. And if it does, I'll spend some time thinking about it. And I'll make a decision based on what's right for Arizona. Senator McSally had this, I don't know how many people could even follow what she was talking about, with these votes here. But what's simple about this is Washington is broken, and this highlights how broken it is that we're having these fights over old Senate rules. What we need to be focused on are people's health care. We've got a lot of individuals and families that have lost their health care due to this pandemic. The economy, these are the issues that Arizonans care about, not a rule in the United States Senate.
Senator McSally, let's move on back to the subject of China. Because China, obviously, many national security officials, current and former, consider it to be our most important adversary at this point.
That's so much China.
How would you go about the relationship with China? And in some ways, has the president made light of it to some extent by mentioning the Chinese flu? How seriously has he done things? And do you credit the administration for holding China in check?
Well, China is our biggest geopolitical threat. I've been involved in national security my entire adult life, and we've seen the rise of China. And look, they have been helped by, unfortunately, political elites like Joe Biden who have outsourced our jobs to China. They're stealing our technology. They're building islands where they didn't exist in the South China Sea and militarizing them. But ultimately, Americans are now awakened because they unleashed this virus on the world. And then we realized that we're relying on our PPE for China. We're relying on pharmaceuticals and other things. So I'm standing up to China to hold them accountable, to bring things back home so they're made in America again. But let me tell you a story. Again, I started in 2003 while he was active duty. Mr. Kelly went over on this Chinese communist government funded trip 2003, 2004, 2005. Said it was the most meaningful thing in his life other than going to space. They're just trying to bring elites into their orbit. It was so meaningful to him. In 2006, he had a chance to go to space. For every little boy and girl whose dream is to go to space, the astronauts who are supporting me, one of them was an Apollo 16 astronaut, and you get to bring a few things to space with you, just a few things. And he brought an American flag, this other astronaut, and a flag of Arizona, or a flag of his state. But what Mark Kelly decided to bring to space was the banner, the Chinese Communist banner from this forum, this junket that was paid for by China, of all the things that he could have brought to space. He later on retired and then recruited Tencent, a company close to the Chinese government, to invest in a company that he co-founded. And later he was over there peddling a pyramid scheme of vitamins with a motorcycle with a Chinese flag on it. So I'm standing up to China while my opponent is doing business with China. And this is the biggest threat we have going forward. We need someone who's going to be strong on China, not doing business with them.
Mr. Kelly, respond to those accusations about your China relationships and then broaden it out for how you deal with China.
Well, Senator McSally just started making China an issue this election cycle when Mitch McConnell allies physically handed her a memo and says, this is the issue in your election. You know, go for it. Hey, I'm a veteran. I served the United States Navy for 25 years. I lived in Japan. I spent time flying off of an aircraft carrier in the South China Sea. I've known China as an adversary my entire adult life, not because I got a memo from Mitch McConnell. You know, Senator McSally is focused on this now because she's desperate to win an election. You know, I had the opportunity to start a business here in Arizona, and I'm never going to apologize for creating good paying jobs and creating a business that is a lot of economic activity here in the state of Arizona. But Senator McSally will use false attacks. She'll question my patriotism over and over again. It's what she did in 2018, and I think folks recognize that. I mean, from this very podium in 2018, Senator McSally yelled treason. So this is just the same false negative attacks. Let me talk about China for a second. So China has been an adversary of ours. I recognize this in the 1980s. Anywhere on the planet where we leave a vacuum, China's going to step into it. We need to hold them accountable. We need to use the diplomatic and economic tools at our disposal to do that. Senator McSally said nothing when the president thanked China on behalf of the American people because of the response on COVID-19. Why is that? Well, I don't think she had her memo yet. This is just a political issue. Senator McSally is using false, negative attacks, trying to attack my patriotism again. And, you know, I think Arizonans are tired of it.
I'm not questioning your patriotism, Mark. I'm questioning your judgment. And the facts are there. You went on the junket, paid for by the Chinese Communist Government, part of their propaganda arm. In 2003, while active duty Navy, 2004, 2005, you said it was the most meaningful thing you've done in your life. And then you chose, of all the things you could have selected, I think about what I would have taken to space with me, you chose the Chinese Communist banner to take to space with you. And then you later have multiple business relationships and ventures with companies that are affiliated with the Chinese government. Those facts are real. So people want a fighter who's going to stand up to China, then I'm your girl. I've been already doing that. They're actually threatening me personally. My mom's a little freaked out about that, but I'm your fighter for this threat. You want somebody who's in business relationship? I'm not questioning your patriotism. It's your judgment. Your business relationships put you in a place where you're weak on China.
So, Mr. Kelly, just
I'm not weak on China.
Briefly respond to this 2006 communist flag thing.
Oh my God.
I don't know what she's talking about.
Thank you.
I don't know where she gets her information. She might have found something on the internet. You know, I've recognized China as an adversary for my entire adult life. You know, Senator McSally talks about this when she's campaigning because she thinks, you know, that this is the way for her to win an election. And that's not what Arizona needs. We need independent leadership focused on solving hard problems. I mean, I had to deal with the Chinese when I was in space on my third space shuttle mission when I was a commander and they blow up a satellite in low Earth orbit. I mean, I had a geopolitical major issue that was directly related to aggression by China as they were testing a missile. I mean, I've known this stuff for a long time. But Senator McSally just likes to lob false political attacks, you know, and question her opponent's patriotism. We've seen it before.
So don't
Let's shift
respond.
now to healthcare. Mr. Kelly, you support the creation of a government-run health insurance option for the public. How much exactly would this system cost, and what is your preferred way of paying for it?
Oh my God.
So, healthcare is incredibly personal for me. When my wife, Gabby Giffords, was shot in 2011, she suffered a serious traumatic brain injury. And I'll never forget being in that ICU room for the very first time and seeing her and looking down and wondering what this means for us. What does this mean for her? What does this mean for our family? Now, fortunately, she had good health insurance. And that's not true for every American, especially lately with folks losing their jobs, and healthcare costs too much. Premiums, deductibles, copays, prescription medication. You know, these are the issues that Arizonans care about and should be working on. So a public option to compete with private insurance on the healthcare exchanges when there are only one option makes a lot of sense. And individuals would potentially pay for that insurance. That's a public option. I think we should also allow folks to buy into Medicare at a certain age, say 50 to 65 years old. That makes a lot of sense. You could remove them from the risk pool. And then we have to address this issue of pre-existing conditions. Senator McSally has voted 4 times. And I often wonder to myself, why is that? Well, Senator McSally takes a lot of corporate PAC money from the health insurance industry and from big pharmaceutical companies. So there's not a lot of desire to make changes in our healthcare system that'll help Arizonans when you're doing something that is not helping those corporations.
Well, who ends up paying for this public option?
Is it?
Do we just add to the national debt? Is there some other mechanism?
Oh my God.
Well,
oh my God.
So at some point, right, in this case, when you provide a public option to compete with private insurance, the person buying the insurance through the public option would be paying for that insurance. And if we're starting to talk about the national debt, Senator McSally voted for a $1.9 trillion tax giveaway to big corporations and the wealthiest Americans when there was no point in doing that. And 80% of that went to the wealthiest Americans and big corporations, put us in a position where we really have to make some really hard choices when a lot of folks need COVID relief.
Thank you.
I've been standing up to the powerful and protecting the vulnerable my entire life. It's what my whole life story is about. And Republicans and Democrats can agree on a couple things related to health care. First is we will always protect pre-existing conditions. There's nobody who disagrees with that. The second is that Obamacare is failing. It's not working. And so what I'm doing is fighting for more options for people. We took away the penalties because the way Obamacare worked, that if you couldn't afford their unaffordable health insurance, the government was fining you. And so I'm fighting for more options for small businesses to band together, for people to have choices. But this public option, which is Bernie Sanders light, really it's the next path to the full government takeover of healthcare. This is going to have, you can't have a public option compete with private health insurance. Everybody who gets health insurance from their employer is eventually going to lose it. The full government will take over. And Medicare, as we know it, will be collapsed. Any seniors tuning in under this expensive plan that is the first step to the government takeover of healthcare. What I want to know, Mark, is how much is a public option going to cost?
Who cares?
Senator McSally, I do have a question for you on healthcare. You have been supportive of Republican plans that nonpartisan analysts say would have left 23 Americans, including many in Arizona, without health coverage. The Senate plan that you are co-sponsoring would guarantee coverage of pre-existing conditions, but those nonpartisan analysts say it would allow women to be charged more than men. Why then should Arizonans want either of those plans should the ACA, or if the ACA already covers them?
Well, I agree women shouldn't be charged more than men. Kids should be able to stay on their parents' insurance till they're 26. And we should never be allowing insurance companies to deny people insurance for pre-existing conditions or raise their cost. But what's happened with Obamacare is the costs keep going up. You know, I met a family when I was walking, knocking doors in the West Valley, Brigham and his wife Tammy and 4 kids. And before Obamacare, he's a plumber, owns his own business. Before Obamacare, he paid $300 a month for his insurance. It's gone up 4 times since then. It's more than his mortgage now. And we had before we got rid of the penalty, we had over 150,000 Arizonans under Obamacare who paid a fine because they couldn't afford the health insurance. And over 80% of them were making less than $50,000 a year. So I'm passionate to provide more choices, but this government takeover of healthcare is dangerous And make no mistake, the public option means the government is competing with private health insurance. They're never going to be able to compete. Private health insurance goes away, and then you have the full government takeover. And I'll tell you, Medicare right now, they say, is going to be insolvent in 2025. Their scheme that allows people to just be put on, more people to be put on Medicare will have it collapse. Rural hospitals will close. Your taxes will go up over $2,300 just in the public option. Private practices will close. And 178 million Americans who get on-the-job health insurance will lose it. This is what's dangerous about their plan. I'm fighting for more options for people. Buy insurance across state lines. Allow small businesses to band together so they have more choice. Let's provide that taxpayer resources to backstop those with the highest expenses. And let's find more options that protect people with pre-existing conditions, not the government health care like Counterfeit Kelly is offering.
All right. Do you want to follow up? Please.
You want to rebut?
Folks, this isn't rocket science. Just follow the money. Senator McSally took a ton of money from health insurance companies and voted to eliminate protections for pre-existing conditions. She took a ton of money from pharmaceutical companies and voted to increase the cost of prescription drugs for seniors. She took millions of dollars from corporate PACs and gave companies billions of dollars of tax giveaways. Bottom line, Senator McSally isn't working for us. She's working for somebody else. She's working for that company that funds that corporate PAC, that funds her campaign. That's not putting Arizona first.
I've got to be able to respond to that. I mean, this is another example of saying one thing and just the counterfeit nature of this whole campaign and what he's saying to Arizonans. Between the beginning of 2018 and the end of 2019, or 18 months, he got $1.8 million in speaking fees, speaking to financial companies and insurance companies. I'm talking about into his bank account, okay? And he uses all the end runs in order to be able to get corporate money from employers and executives. Don't be fooled. He's saying one thing to all of you that may sound good, but in reality, he's getting rich and has gotten rich off corporations, and they're funding his campaign. We cannot put up with more counterfeit discussions on this. I mean, this is saying one thing, and then the attacks towards me. I'm always going to protect people with pre-existing conditions, and they're attacking my integrity. Integrity first is the top core value in the Air Force and in my life. And I've been standing up to the powerful and protecting the vulnerable my whole life, and I'm going to keep doing it as your fighter in the Senate.
On this issue of pre-existing conditions, people in Arizona are very concerned about this. Healthcare consistently is a top issue in this race. Why should Arizonans trust you on this issue?
Because I'm telling you, I'm committed to protecting people with pre-existing conditions, and I have repeatedly voted to include last week to protect people with pre-existing conditions. But there's people in Arizona with pre-existing conditions right now who are being failed by Obamacare. What about them? So I'm rolling up my sleeve. Some politicians sit back and they don't want to solve hard problems. I'm rolling up my sleeve to fight for them. The entrepreneur who's going uncovered right now, who I met in Tucson, the franchise owner, Hispanic franchise owner, had to give up his businesses and work for a big business because he got diagnosed with diabetes. So we've got to fix this. And we've got to protect people with pre-existing conditions. These are scare tactics. And I'm also going to continue to fight to stop the government takeover of healthcare. These guys agree Obamacare is failing. I wish the media would at least acknowledge that. But what they want is going to be dangerous to Medicare and those who get on-the-job health insurance.
Mr. Kelly, do you agree that Senator McSally always protects those with pre-existing conditions?
Well, of course not. And Arizonans already know they can't trust Senator McSally when it comes to health care. She's voted on 4 separate occasions to undermine or eliminate those protections. I was with this mom, Stacy, recently. Her daughter's named Zoe, and she had a terrible heart condition that she was born with and had to have multiple surgeries. And she reached a lifetime cap when she was not even into her teens on what her health care has cost. And they were always concerned that because of her pre-existing condition as an adult, she wouldn't be able to get health care coverage. But then the Affordable Care Act came around, and it changed their lives. Senator McSally is trying to take away those protections from 2.8 million Arizonans. She's done a lawsuit that's at the Supreme Court. The case is going to be heard on November 10th. That's not independent leadership. We need independent leadership that's going to put Arizona first, that's not going to put a big corporate PAC or a healthcare company or a big pharmaceutical company first.
All right.
Look, these scare tactics, these votes he's talking about, Arizonans, it's because I said I was against Obamacare. because I hear too many stories of where Obamacare is failing people, and they have pre-existing conditions, and they can't get access to affordable health insurance. So I'm fighting to start the process to find more options for you. And a lot of politicians just sit back and vote no because they're afraid of just these scare tactics from Counterfeit Kelly. Instead of him being honest about what their plan will do, the public option will end Medicare as we know it, will take away your private health insurance for 178 million people, and raise your taxes. It's dangerous. I'm going to fight against it. But know that these votes and this scare tactic, it's a lie. It's because I'm passionate about fixing the healthcare system that's broken right now.
Mr. Kelly, quick rebuttal, please.
Yeah, those protections, by the way, that 2.8 million Arizonans have, well, all 7.5 million of us were saved by John McCain in a vote in the United States Senate. He saved the Affordable Care Act, so he saved those protections that Senator McSally spent years trying to undo.
Okay, we need to move on here. Senator, you have consistently supported President Trump. You supported the administration's policy. You voted policies, I should say, and you have voted not to convict on impeachment. Are you proud of your support for President Trump?
Well, I'm proud that I'm fighting for Arizonans on things like cutting your taxes. We passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and on average, Arizona middle-class families had their taxes cut by $2,000. We had such a strong economy before this first-in-a-century pandemic hit, and so we fought to cut your taxes. We fought to rebuild our military after the Obama-Biden administration decimated our military. 25% cuts when deployments were going up. We had a hollow force. Voted to secure our border. Border security is national security, and that means something here in Arizona. We see the cartel activity. And as your senator, I've got the most bills passed than any other senator, tied for first, for most bills signed into law out of any of the 100 senators, and was the 6th most bipartisan senator. That's my record. Fighting for Arizona, putting legislation on the president's desk. I put legislation on President Obama's desk when I was in the House. I put legislation on President Trump's desk. I go to Washington, D.C. with an AZ on my jersey to fight for Arizona. But this is what's at stake here. My opponent says he would support Bernie Sanders at the top of the ticket when he was surging. And we now have a situation where this is going to decide the Senate majority. And if Biden, Schumer, and Pelosi are in charge, they're going to abolish the filibuster. They're going to ram through the most radical agenda that we've seen. So Counterfeit Kelly says he's an independent and a moderate and lots of platitudes here, but the stakes could not be higher. If you want your tax cuts, I'm your girl. You want the largest tax increase in history? You got somebody else over here.
Senator, the question was, are you proud of your support for President Trump?
I'm proud to be fighting for Arizona every single day.
Is that a yes or a no for President Trump?
Putting legislation on President Trump's desk.
So you're proud of your support for President Trump?
You look at the legislation we put on his desk, it's to cut Arizona taxes.
It sounds like she is proud of her support for President Trump.
I'm proud to be fighting for Arizona. The question is, why was he wanting to support Bernie Sanders?
Regarding President Trump, your overall impression of his behavior and his actions in office. Your opponent just basically said she's proud of her support. Would you support such a person?
No, not acceptable. And but what really concerns me are the things that matter to everyday Arizonans, like their health care, like a $1.9 trillion tax cut that he passed that went to the biggest corporations and the wealthiest Americans. And after that tax cut was passed, twice as many companies paid $0 in federal income tax. That's not leadership. That's not what we need. I think that was a mistake. That didn't help middle-class taxpayers and working-class folks here in Arizona. So I have major concerns. But we have an election in 30 days, and America has a choice to make as to who the next president is going to be, who's going to serve in the Senate, the House. There's governor's races around the country. These are serious issues. We've got a public health crisis and a serious economic crisis. We have a United States Senate that has gone on vacation 4 times since this pandemic has started. And I don't think Senator McSally has stood up once to her party and said, why are we going home? We have serious issues to address. Arizona has 420,000 individuals trying to get by on $240 a week. They're having to make horrible choices about paying their rent and buying groceries and filling their prescriptions. That's not choices that Arizonans should have to make when they did nothing wrong here. The federal government and Senator McSally failed. And we have 4% of the world's population right now. We've got 21% of the deaths from COVID-19. 210,000 individuals have lost their lives.
Would you have voted to convict President Trump of impeachment?
Well, first I wanted to see, testimony from the White House, witnesses. That would have been a good starting point. But based on the information I had, yes.
And Senator McSally, real quickly on your end, would you have wanted to serve under someone like a Donald Trump when you were in the military?
Well, again, I'm proud to be working with the president to rebuild our military. Under Obama and Biden, they cut our military to the bone. We had a readiness crisis like we haven't seen in so many years since really Jimmy Carter. And now we're giving them everything they need to fight tonight. But if you look at what Biden, Schumer, and Pelosi will do if they're in charge, they're going to cut our military to pay for their schemes. But talking about taxes, I do want to go back to this. I released my taxes today so that I'm transparent, so that people can see what kind of money I've made, how I made it, and what I paid in taxes and deductions and gave to charity. I'm calling on my opponent to also release his taxes so Arizonans can see where he's made his money over the last 5 years and where that all came from. I mean, this is just basic transparency. And I'll tell you, the tax cuts that I'm very proud of, because a family of four in Arizona, they make $60,000 before they pay their first dollar in taxes. This was meaningful to Arizonans.
And Senator, the question remains: would you have liked to have served under someone like a Donald Trump when you were in the military?
Someone who is giving our military everything they need to fight tonight. We've had 75% of our Army units who couldn't deploy under Obama and Biden.
So the answer is yes.
Giving us what we need so that we are not looking into museums for parts for airplanes, so that we can ensure that we can fight against our enemies. We gave them the largest pay raise in 10 years. We're investing in capabilities to take on China. It's so important that we continue to support our military, and I've been working with President Trump to rebuild them.
All right. Thank you, candidates. We're now going to take a short break here, and we will get right back to the debate, and we'll do so in just a few minutes.
This election season, stay informed with news and analysis you can trust. From Frontline, The Choice 2020, Trump versus Biden. Voices presents Latino Vote. The PBS NewsHour.
Biggest day of voting since the COVID-19.
Washington Week.
Nation on edge.
Amanpour and Company.
This is a very difficult time.
And Firing Line.
Our election's going to be vulnerable.
Get complete election coverage with these programs and so much more. This fall, only on PBS and the PBS Video app.
Pay attention, please.
I got something I gotta tell you.
I was raised to believe no dream is unreachable.
You can't get in the way of a good story.
Hemingway is this enormous talent.
That's wonderful. What I got is the new thing.
The game just got bigger. Did you?
It's better.
Wow.
Tell the world, spread the word.
It remains a fast-moving story.
Get to the bottom of it.
This is what adventures are made of.
All right, guys. Let me know if you guys can hear me. We are in the middle of a commercial break, which I was not told about. We are going to stop sharing until the show is back. Yeah. So that was an interesting start of a debate. Nothing super exciting from the top, except for the fact that Martha McSally seems to be extremely desperate right now. With her attacks on Mark Kelly. She is at least down, there's several polls out there, but she is at least down right now by 10 points. Somewhere around 11 to 13, the most recent polls. The most accurate poll is she's down by 11 points. What I found most interesting, and we'll talk about this afterwards with Alex Kack, who is a community organizer in Tucson. He's been involved in politics for a long time. You may know him as the green shirt guy. He is going to be joining us afterwards to do some analysis with me to talk about Arizona, just like the landscape. But what I found was so interesting is she was distancing herself from Donald Trump, which is odd. Because Donald Trump is actually doing better than she is in the polls right now. So you'd think that she would want to tie herself a little bit more to Donald Trump than distance herself. So maybe there's something in the subtext of the polls that we're not seeing, where she's losing support. First thing, she didn't win her Senate seat. So let's just make that very clear. She was appointed to the Senate seat and she lost to Kyrsten Sinema and she lost, but she was able to keep a part of her support that might be critical of Donald Trump. How she'd be able to make up that difference, I think this race is actually a very accurate analysis of the real state of Arizona, which is you have a very loud portion of Trump supporters on the right, on the far right, but the majority of the Republican Party is a little bit more libertarian. It's a little bit more like a John McCain, a John Kyle. I mean, the Goldwater Republicans. It's a different type of Republican Party. Just in the last decade or so, I think a lot of people in national politics, including Chuck Schumer, think it's more far right. And that, I think, my only criticism is that you have Chuck Schumer, who does, he is the head of the Democratic Senate caucus. He's running, he's the leadership for the DSCC, the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee. And so they are picking the choices for Democrats. And Kyrsten Sinema, of course, is a Blue Dog Democrat. And Mark Kelly has, while he's not taking corporate PAC money, he has shifted a little bit left. He did not start that way. And Gabby Giffords was a Blue Dog as well. So I think there's an idea of what Arizonans are. But of course, Bernie Sanders did do very, very well. So all those attacks on him, Mark Kelly for siding with Bernie Sanders, I'm not sure that's going to work out. All right, we're going to go live again right now.
About 40%, which equates into a drop in sales tax revenue in communities directly along the border, which, as you both know, face challenges when it comes to poverty. What sort of plan do you have to give those communities extra support as we come out of the pandemic? Senator McSally, we'll begin with you.
Well, great. First passed the CARES Act to be able to get relief out to families and to small businesses. But uniquely on the border, I've helped pass USMCA. This is a great opportunity for cross-border commerce and more jobs in Arizona. And I've delivered on the ports of entry, the San Luis Port of Entry. I delivered to be able to get over $150 million to upgrade that. And as part of my bipartisanship, I've been working with Senator Sinema on issues on the border so that people can travel more than 75 miles. This is a bill we're both behind, and spend more money around Arizona in border communities and beyond. But when we're talking about the border, there's a lot at stake here. Border security is national security. I do support the president's border wall, the border wall system, and Border Patrol agents and ranchers are really seeing a difference. My opponent, unfortunately, when the vice president of the Border Patrol Council went to meet him at the Veterans Day parade last year and just reached his hand out to shake his hand. He wouldn't shake his hand, turned away and said, "You're one of them." When nobody was looking, this is what Mark Kelly did. He says he's border for security, but then he turns his back and won't shake the hand of a Border Patrol agent. And when he ran this political organization I mentioned earlier, $57 million raised endorsing candidates all over the country. He also endorsed David Garcia for governor, who said we shouldn't have any borders. We should have no border security, no border wall. I mean, that's what's at stake here. When he says one thing here, which he'll probably talk about border security, but being behind David Garcia and not shaking a Border Patrol agent's hand, I mean, that's another example of counterfeit Kelly saying one thing on camera or in 30-second ads, but doing something totally different when nobody's looking.
Mr. Kelly, 45 seconds first. Did you not shake the hand of a federal law enforcement officer?
That never happened. I will shake anybody's hand anytime. I'm the son of 2 police officers. My mother was one of the first female police officers in northern New Jersey. I don't know where Senator McSally gets this stuff from. But
from the agent.
Do you believe in more border security?
Yeah, well, first of all, the question was about sales tax, and I believe you mean because the ports of entry have been closed, that these communities are suffering economically. I think it's important to note that Senator McSally, months ago at the beginning of this pandemic, clearly said that towns and cities, communities shouldn't get extra help from the federal government to get us through this crisis. And I think that's wrong. That's why these communities are suffering. But the main reason why they're suffering is we have a failure of leadership to address a serious pandemic. We've got 4% of the world's population, 21% of the COVID-19 deaths. This administration and Senator McSally didn't take the appropriate action necessary to get this under control. There was no plan when we shut down the economy, and then we didn't have a plan to what do we do now? They just basically ignored it. There was no plan for testing and contact tracing. So I think it's important to note that we need strong border security. That is clear. I worked at NASA for 15 years. NASA wouldn't give you the 17th century solution to the 21st century problem, but there's a way to do this, and border security is incredibly important to our state. It's important to our economy.
Senator McSally, you've expressed support for President Trump's border wall. Yeah. There was some concern about how it was funded, though. The president said Mexico would pay for it. That hasn't happened. Also, some money was diverted from the Defense Department. You've already expressed support for the military clearly and for how President Trump has handled it. How do you feel about how the money was being used to build the border wall?
Well, border security is national security, and we should not have to choose between supporting our military and securing our border. So I'm for both, and I've been voting for increased funding for both of those. But we need to go back to, did you hear what he just said? He's against a 17th century solution. So that means he's against the border wall, which ranchers like John Ladd, fifth generation ranchers, are seeing right now what the border wall system is doing to stop the illegal activity across the ranch. But, Mr. Kelly tries to pretend that he's just an aw shucks, independent, not political guy. But over the last decade, he has led one of the most sophisticated, radical political organizations. And while he's saying one thing here in Phoenix, he was literally flying all over the country to bankroll and to endorse extreme liberal candidates who are so left-wing and dangerous on these policies, like members of the Squad, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib. These people are leading the effort to abolish ICE, to stop border security. And if you remember, all of the Democrats running for president raised their hand, free health care for everybody here illegally, decriminalizing border crossing. This is what's at stake in this election. If the Senate majority flips, which will go through Arizona, they will ram through this agenda, which is so extreme. But Mr. Kelly has been funding and been bankrolling and endorsing these extreme candidates who are behind these ideas over the last decade. Make no mistake, he is a political operative. It was a very sophisticated operation.
Okay, Senator,
and that impacts our border security.
Time is up. Would you like to respond, please?
Well, border security is critical to our state. And what we need is technology in the appropriate places. In some places, a barrier and fencing completely makes sense. More Border Patrol agents on the border. That's, smart way to do this. I think we also need more judges to handle asylum seekers. And we've got to address this issue of DACA recipients and give them some certainty in their lives. Senator McSally used to support Dreamers. And then she said DACA is unconstitutional. There was a bipartisan agreement on a pathway to a normal status for Dreamers. Senator McSally used to support it. And then when it wasn't politically convenient anymore, she decided not to. That's not the independent leadership that Arizona needs.
Senator McSally, we're going to want to get your take on DACA, but to follow up on this, there have been many people on both sides who've said, yes, border security, vitally important, but they talk more about technology as opposed to the wall. The old joke was build a 10-foot wall, someone will find an 11-foot ladder. Is there more to be done with border security than just President Trump's wall?
Well, it's a border wall system. And when you talk to the ranchers, it really makes a difference whether there's chicken wire or whether they have 30-foot and 6-foot down, a paved road, the sonar sensors. It allows Border Patrol to use intelligence-driven operations to detect and intercept the activity. Also using airborne assets and manned and unmanned, with towers and airborne assets and other things. So it's all of the above. But the border wall system is making a difference. And Mr. Kelly still hasn't answered the question as to, he can say he's for border security, but you support politicians like Omar and Tlaib. You said you support Bernie Sanders. You support David Garcia. If David Garcia were our governor right now, we would have a governor who's against any sort of border on the south side of Arizona. What is up with that? Do you want to denounce those endorsements?
Hey, border security is incredibly important for our state. And I've already addressed this. I would not provide a 17th century solution to this. If you were to ask NASA to do this, it would be technology. It would be some of the things that Senator McSally just mentioned. But to build a wall for 2,000 miles of border, $20 million a mile, those resources could be used for the technology. It could be used for more Border Patrol agents on the border. There's smart ways to address this. And you asked about funding for military bases. Senator McSally voted to take away money from Fort Huachuca to pay for the border wall. An Arizona senator shouldn't be taking away money from Arizona bases.
Moving on to immigration reform. Mr. Kelly, President Trump wants Congress to pass legislation that would make our immigration system more of a merit-based system rather than the current family-based system. Is that a good idea?
Well, I'm in support of, H-2B visas and, H-1Bs and H-2A visas, agricultural workers, but also folks that are educated. We need an immigration system that's going to be consistent with our values and is going to support our economy. So if President Trump has a proposal for something that does those things, recognizing we're a country of immigrants, I come from a family of immigrants, I think most of us do. And if there are proposals from this president, if I'm elected to the United States Senate, President Trump is reelected, I will work with him on anything that is in the best interest of Arizona.
Senator McSally, do you favor immigration reform that includes a way for young dreamers brought to this country as children to become legal, permanent citizens?
Well, my heart goes out to these young people who were brought here as children of no fault of their own. They know no other country but America. And I have been leading on solutions to provide a legal path for DACA recipients. But we cannot just address that issue. We've got to address the root issues as well of why we're in this situation in the first place. That's why it's so important for us to continue to secure our border, complete the border wall system, provide our Border Patrol agents, who I have their backs. You won't shake their hand, but I have their backs. Provide them everything they need to keep us safe. And as we move forward, we've got to close these loopholes because we see where the cartels see if they can just traffic families, traffic children on this dangerous journey, they're going to be able to use those loopholes. We've got to close those loopholes to ensure that families can stay together, but ensure that we have a legal immigration system. People come through that front door. So I've been leading on this issue in the House. I've been leading on it in the Senate, but it includes, we've got to have that border security. We've got to close those loopholes so we don't find ourselves in the very same situation with another DACA-like group of young people in another 5, 10, or 15 years.
Mr. Kelly, should DACA be contingent on other aspects of border security?
So border security is incredibly important. We need it, but we have 28,000, mostly young people in the state of Arizona who I look at as American as my own 2 kids. And I think they should have a pathway to citizenship right now. That's something Senator McSally used to kind of support. She was in favor of a DACA program. Now she says it's unconstitutional. So I don't think it's contingent on anything.
Okay, standalone issue for you.
Standalone.
Standalone for you?
I believe we've got to pair it. Again, I've been leading on this issue, trying to provide a path forward for these young people, but we've got to address the root causes of why we're in this situation in the first place, because all it will do, like we've seen in the past, is incentivize more illegal activity. And again, my opponent, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Counterfeit Kelly, he hasn't explained why he supported David Garcia to be the governor of Arizona, why he said he would support Bernie Sanders, why he bankrolled Rashida Tlaib, who has some of the most dangerous ideas on abolishing ICE and sanctuary cities, as well as Ilhan Omar in Minneapolis, and many others who are from the radical left element of the Democrats. Keep in mind, $57 million that he raised from some of the most extreme left-wing people in the country in order to then endorse and bankroll these individuals who are now in office with these ideas that are dangerous for Arizona.
So just to be clear for the people who are watching at home and don't know what group you're talking about or these endorsements, can you please be specific about the group and the endorsements?
Well, I think he knows. Again, it's a very radical political organization that's raised $57 million. And then, again, he's been a political operative for a decade. At the state legislature, at the governors, those running for House and those running for Senate, some of the most extreme left-wing candidates in our country running for office, bankrolling them, endorsing them. Look at the photo. He's got his arm around Omar in Minneapolis. What are you doing in Minneapolis hugging Omar?
What? Mr. Kelly, these endorsements.
So the organization that Senator McSally is referring to is named after my wife, Gabby Giffords. It's named Giffords. Gabby was injured, shot in the head in 2011. The issue of gun violence is personal for Gabby and me. And I'll never forget, what she went through for that year and a half in the hospital for 6 months, a year of significant rehab. Today, she still does physical therapy and speech therapy. It's an incredible challenge. So we formed an organization to try to make communities and help communities become safer, safer from gun violence. I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. I'm a gun owner. Our rights and traditions are so important. The Second Amendment is so important. But we can never let a bunch of kids in the classroom, get killed and think there's nothing we can do about it. Common sense things like background checks for all gun sales, red flag laws. These are common sense things that most Arizonans support. Apparently, Senator McSally does not.
Senator McSally, the president has reportedly, by way of the Wall Street Journal, the Atlantic Monthly, CNN, Fox News, all reporting that he referred to members of the military as, quote, losers and suckers. You are a military veteran. Your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm not going to comment on anonymous sources, but what I can tell you is I'm proud to have been able to serve in the military, and we're working to rebuild our military after Obama and Biden decimated our military, giving our troops everything they need in order to fight tonight. I mean, we had our units where they were not ready to go. They were decimated in a readiness crisis. We had more people dying in training accidents than they were in combat in the end years of Obama and Biden. So I'm working with President Trump to rebuild our military, to save the A-10, by the way, something I did when President Obama tried to cut it, then President Trump tried to cut it, and I just saved it again. This is critical for Tucson and Davis-Monthan, and the troops are on the ground. So I'm always going to have the military's back. But what's at stake here, should we lose the White House, the Senate, and the House, which comes through Arizona, this race will decide the Senate majority. And Chuck Schumer is so proud to have recruited Mark Kelly. He's bankrolled his campaign. He's trying to ensure he has power. And if they get power, the radical left agenda is going to cut our military to pay for the green bad deal, the government takeover of healthcare, and all the other ideas careening towards socialism. So I'm going to stand every single day with our men and women in the military and fight to give them everything they need. That's what's at stake here.
Senator, the question remains, have you looked into the reports? Have you looked into the anonymous sourced reports? Does it concern you? It concerns a lot of people and a lot of military families. Does it concern you?
I get up every single morning fighting for Arizona. That's what I spend my time doing. I listen to Arizonans, hear what they need, and then I deploy to Washington, D.C. to fight for them. You pundits can look into those anonymous allegations, and I'm just telling you, I'm fighting for our military. I'm fighting for our veterans, but they will cut our military again if they gain power.
Mr. Kelly, does it concern you?
Absolutely. He's the commander-in-chief of our armed forces. And to say that about deceased veterans who died on the battlefield, calling them losers and suckers. What also concerns me is what he said about Senator John McCain repeatedly on more than one occasion, especially after when he passed away. And those comments are just uncalled for. Senator McCain was a hero of mine from my earliest days in the United States Navy as a Navy pilot. He's the guy we looked up to. He's the guy that, in the unfortunate situation that you ever got shot down, he was the model. I later got to call him a friend and got to know him, which was one of the greatest honors of my lifetime, I would say. And to hear Senator McSally not stick up for Senator John McCain when the President of the United States is attacking him repeatedly, even after he passed away. And as a veteran, I find it incredibly hard to understand that on not one occasion would Senator McSally come to Senator McCain's defense.
Did you not stick up for Senator McCain?
I absolutely have. It's been reported many times. I've publicly and privately, repeatedly talked to President Trump and asked him to stop attacking John McCain. Quite frankly, it pisses me off when he does it. It's been an honor to even work with Senator John McCain. I never would have imagined. I learned about him when I was a cadet in the military, about what he endured as a POW, and to be able to work with him to save the A-10 and support our military, and now be able to serve in his seat. And so I've repeatedly said, stop doing that. Let's let him rest in peace. But one thing about Senator McCain we knew here in Arizona, whether you agreed with him or you disagreed with him, we always knew where he stood. And this is another example, Mark, where you're trying to invoke him, but you can't even take simple positions on whether you're going to support your recruiter and investor, Chuck Schumer, whether you're going to abolish the filibuster, whether you support packing the Supreme Court, where you say one thing, a bunch of platitudes, but you can't even tell Arizonans where you stand.
Thank you, Senator.
Let's move on to climate change, and a reminder, you'll each have 90 seconds to respond to this question. This year, Arizona experienced the driest, hottest summer on record. The state's water supply, as you both know, is in a precarious position. A recent poll shows that 70% of Arizonans want climate change to be a national priority. How do we affordably transition to renewable solutions? Senator McSally, we'll start with you.
Thanks. The climate is changing, and there is a human element to it. The question is, what do we do? What we should not do is the green bad deal. Again, this has been proposed. The author of the Green Deal is someone that my opponent endorsed and bankrolled. And he said, let's ban fossil fuels and have a carbon tax himself. What the green bag deal would do is it would cost $93 trillion. That's $65,000 for every household in America every year. This heavy-handed approach would be devastating to our economy. And you can just look next door in California. They're trying these heavy-handed mandates that are not working. They have blackouts right now because it's not based on the science. I've been leading on efforts to ensure we have an all-of-the-above energy strategy. We're finally in a place where we're energy independent. Thank God. I've deployed to the Middle East 5 times and once to Afghanistan. So we're now a net exporter of energy. We need additional clean energy for sure, but that includes nuclear, the Palo Verde nuclear plant. I've been leading on efforts so we can have more research in energy storage, because right now the sun goes down at night and we don't have good grid level storage. And for any of that storage, even if it's for a few hours, we're relying on China for those minerals and that processing. So we've got to bring those jobs home. So look, you said you would ban fossil fuels, you're for a carbon tax. How is that any different than the Green Bad Deal? And you've supported the author of the Green New Deal, which would be devastating for Arizona households, those in rural communities who can't afford their electric bills as it is. Let's use innovation, not what the left is offering.
Mr. Kelly, you have 90 seconds.
Well, I don't know where Senator McSally gets her information from, but since the Green New Deal was authored, I've been against it. There's a lot of stuff in there that has nothing to do with climate. I made that very clear. I don't know why she says I'm against fossil fuels. I'm a pilot of an airplane. So is Senator McSally. You're not going to do that without fossil fuels. It's kind of, the whole thing's kind of silly. But I'll never forget the first time I got to see our planet for the first time from low Earth orbit, you know, seeing this big round ball and realizing that we are really all in this together. And it becomes very clear very quickly that we have no place else to go. There is no planet B. We're not moving somewhere else someday. We have to do a better job taking care of this planet. We have gone from about 280 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere pre-industrial revolution to about 420 today. You talk about flattening a curve, that's a curve we need to flatten. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to move to more renewable energy. With Senator McSally, you just got to follow the money. You know, Senator McSally takes hundreds of thousands of dollars of corporate PAC checks from oil and gas companies and gives them a $20 billion tax cut, essentially. And that's why we're having a difficult time solving this problem. Hey, this could be good for Arizona. If we extend the investment tax credit by 5 years, 30% on solar energy, this could be good jobs. We can create the technology here. We can manufacture it here. We can deploy it here. It could be great for our state, but we can't wait around and do nothing anymore. We need independent leadership in Washington, D.C. that's going to put Arizona first, not put a big corporation on the other side of the country first.
Do you support mandates with deadlines to get this done? One example, requiring zero-emission vehicles by a certain date.
Hey, I think when this administration rolled back emission standards and also clean air regulations and clean water regulations, that now we're going to have more polluted air and more polluted water. Senator McSally supported all that. That was a mistake.
Senator, do you support mandates with deadlines?
I'm an outdoors woman and I want clean air and clean water, but what I don't want is to hurt Arizonans, the working poor, rural Arizonans, those in tribal communities who can't afford these mandates that are coming from Washington, D.C. that are not based on science. We saw that under Obama, but now they're going too far. And look, this is another example where he's saying he didn't say let's ban fossil fuels, but in a TV interview last year, he said those very words. I think we should ban fossil fuels and have a carbon tax. This is a regressive tax that would hurt the working poor and hurt rural communities the most. So I'm leading on investing in energy research so we can have energy storage. We can find cleaner ways for our energy to move forward, but do it based on the science and innovation. We're going to innovate our way out of this, and America will lead the way. And in the meantime, our emissions are going down. Our CO2 emissions are going down. China, the big polluter, who he's doing business with, their emissions are going up. So let's innovate our way out, not ban fossil fuels like Counterfeit Kelly wants to do.
I don't know where Senator McSally gets her information from, but there is no circumstance where I ever said to ban fossil fuels. So at this point, she's just making stuff up.
Mr. Kelly, different sort of climate question. It's the climate in our cities, frankly. In the wake of the killing of George Floyd in May, we saw rallies, we saw protests. President Trump, in some cases, referred to them as violent. We've seen, is there a discussion of who's on the right, who's on the left, who's causing these problems? The fact is, if you were to be in the Senate, that could be a federal responsibility in terms of funding for our cities, funding for police forces. Where do you stand on that in terms of helping our cities deal with some of this, whether it's social injustice, racial injustice, or just police relations with communities?
Well, the promise of our country shouldn't be that your race determines what kind of education you get, what kind of health care you can get, success in life, or how an interaction with the police is going to turn out. And we need some reform in policing. Both of my parents were cops. So I understand it is incredibly difficult jobs. Police officers need the resources to do a very hard job. I am 100% behind that. And it's a difficult job. I recognize that. But there are necessary reforms needed in policing. But the protests that we have seen across the country, there is no place for that. I fought to defend our Constitution, our First Amendment, the right for people to peacefully protest. But what we've seen over the last months is beyond that, and it needs to end. And cities and communities need the resources to deal with this in an effective way. And then we've got to, there's some common sense things we can do to keep mostly African American men safer in these encounters when they're encountering police. More accountability, independent investigations and oversight, body cameras, consent decrees, which is the Department of Justice overseeing police departments when they need to make some changes. This issue of qualified immunity. These are common sense things that can be done to reform policing. I think it's necessary, but the violence we see in our communities has to end. The federal government should be helping with some resources where it makes sense and where governors need that.
Senator, what reforms would you like to see on that?
Well, we got to rout out racism in any form, whether it's in any institution or in anyone's hearts. And there's only one candidate up here who has had to apologize for a racist slur, and it's not me. And if you watch the murder of George Floyd, it was despicable, not just the officer who killed him, but those who stood by and allowed it to happen. And so we moved forward some common sense police reform. Tim Scott's bill, it was about 70% of what the Democrats were asking for. It was good reforms in order to address some of these issues and give more funding to police. I back the blue. I've gotten the endorsement of the Arizona Police Association. What's happening right now in our cities, the violence is despicable, and you see many on the left who are just standing by and doing nothing. Again, I'd ask my opponent whether he wants to take back the endorsement that he gave to Ilhan Omar, who in Minneapolis was leading the effort to defund the police. He's standing there with his arm around him. This is dangerous. The 12,000 officers in the Arizona Police Association, they know that I've got their back, and that's why they're backing me. And I think I just heard, I'd like to know whether he would vote for Tim Scott's bill, but I think I just heard that he wants to support criminals being able to sue police officers just for doing their jobs. Now, I know what it's like to make life and death decisions in combat in the A-10 Warthog, and our men and women go out every single day and kiss their families goodbye. They need to have our backs and not have criminals to be able to sue them. Did you say you supported that? Nancy Pelosi bill, who you also endorsed and supported,
well,
to allow criminals to sue police officers?
On the Tim Scott bill that you referenced, the Leadership Conference on Human and Civil Rights says it's inadequate, and other organizations. It didn't include qualified immunity. It didn't include consent decrees. It didn't include body cameras or use of force laws. I think that when police officers are found that there was serious wrongdoing, there should be an accountability aspect to that. As a son of two police officers, my mom and my dad, I realize this is a tough job. But there should be accountability, there should be independent investigation, and there should be oversight.
Senator McSally, are our cities safe? Some would say President Trump has sort of fomented some of the racial problems by making it seem as if there's a divide between white and black.
The violence and the anarchy that's happening in cities across the country is devastating to local communities. The violence is going up. The attacks on police officers. Listen to what Counterfeit Kelly just said. He said he would support allowing criminals to sue police officers simply for doing their job. That's why they're backing me, those police officers. They know with the attacks that are going up on them right now, vilifying them, that are led by people like Ilhan Omar, his wingman. That's what's happening right now. We need more funding the police. We need to back the blue. And those local mayors, they need to provide public safety. Look, what these guys want, if they're given, if they're given power, which we need to stop from happening, is to vilify the police, defund the police, and then come after your Second Amendment rights so you can't defend yourself and your families. I back the blue, and we need to make sure they have everything they need to keep us safe.
Do you support criminals filing suit against police officers just for doing their jobs?
Not criminals filing suits against police officers, but when there's wrongdoing, and clearly there was an investigation, and part of being accountable and part of being respectful in the community, I think, there should be some level of accountability for cops when there was clear wrongdoing.
Look, that's a big deal. These men and women in blue, they could lose their retirements, they could lose their homes, their college funds simply for doing their jobs. Getting sued by criminals, getting rid of this qualified immunity, that's what it means, you guys. I back the blue.
All right, let's move on. Senator McSally, after mass shootings last year, you said that you would be open to considering red flag gun laws to try to keep weapons away from dangerous people. Is that the case, and what specifically would that look like today?
Yeah. What I said was we need to do everything we can in order to stop these tragedies from happening. And I've been leading on this in the House and the Senate. We've got a background check system that often isn't working as it is. We've had shootings happen where somebody should have been in the system, but instead they passed a background check. So I've passed the Fix NICS Act to make sure we strengthen that background check system. And we need more mental health support. I've led on the effort to get more mental health funding out there and more support to schools for them to have the security they need so parents can drop their kids off at schools and ensure that they are safe. But right now, more than ever, I'm your Second Amendment senator. I think I've shot the biggest gun of anybody in Congress in the 30 millimeter on the A-10. And our constitutional rights are at risk right now. And, Counterfeit Kelly can say, I've got some guns, but make no mistake, the agenda of the people he has supported, to include people like Beto O'Rourke and others, they're coming after our Second Amendment rights right now. Law-abiding citizens deserve to keep their ability to defend their family and defend their own lives. And that's what's at stake right now. We're one judge away for us losing our Second Amendment rights, and their legislative agenda will be coming after them as well. So we can do things like I've led on in order to protect communities, but we must protect the Second Amendment.
So again, last year you said you were open to considering red flag gun laws. Is that still the case?
You're misstating the conversations we were having with the White House. We need to make sure that if somebody has been adjudicated to be mentally ill by a judge, that they're in the NICS system. That's what the law is right now. And many states don't put that information in the NICS system, so people end up passing a background check anyway. We've got to have due process for people. We've got to ensure that their constitutional rights are never taken away unless they have gone through that due process. And the laws are on the books. If you're a felon or a domestic abuser or you've been adjudicated to be mentally ill, I support the Second Amendment. We need to do everything we can, obviously, to keep communities safe. But you all, the people he's supporting, they want to defund the police, and then they want to take away your Second Amendment rights so you can't defend your family. I'm against that.
Just to be clear, I did not misspeak. We've had multiple conversations, the Arizona Republic with your office, so I just want to be clear on that. We've written quite a bit about that. Mr. Kelly, a lot of Americans first heard of you as the voice of gun control in this nation. Here you are running for the U.S. Senate, and you haven't raised the issue of gun safety or gun control much over the last year and a half that you've been in this race. Why not?
Well, the issue is incredibly important to me, and it's incredibly important to Arizonans. And I have to first say, Senator McSally, I have a lot of respect for that 30 millimeter cannon in the A-10 that Senator McSally got to shoot. It's a great weapon system. I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. I have been my whole life. I remember when my dad gave me my first firearm. I was in Beeville, Texas, going through flight school, just got my wings, and he bought me a 9mm Glock. And that's the gun that I flew in combat with in the first Gulf War. It's one of my most prized possessions. And I have a lot of firearms. But I don't think that we should ever get to the point where we think a bunch of kids getting killed in a classroom is just normal. Some stronger gun laws is not inconsistent with our Second Amendment rights. We can respect our rights and traditions on gun ownership under the Second Amendment, and we can have stronger communities. That includes things like, Yvonne, like you mentioned, red flag laws, background checks for all gun sales. Senator McSally in the past has said background checks are unconstitutional. Well, most guns are sold with a background check right now, but there's these giant loopholes that you can drive a truck through. And here in Arizona, a majority of Arizonans support background checks for all gun sales and red flag laws and a couple other things. These are common sense things that'll keep communities safe, and at the same time, we can respect our Second Amendment rights.
Why haven't you talked more about your viewpoints on this on the campaign trail?
Well, I generally talk about what folks ask me about, and they often ask about their health care, prescription drugs, the price of prescription medication. I met this mom, recently named Ophelia, and she was having to make these horrible decisions about whether she fills her son's prescription, her prescription, or buys groceries for the week. These are horrible choices that Arizonans currently have to make. These are the issues that folks care about. Not getting COVID-19 relief. We have so many members of our community that are really struggling. Food banks are maxed out. Folks are having to make these horrible choices, and the United States Senate went home. That's not leadership for Arizona.
Real quickly, are you against background checks for all gun sales?
Well, I'm for the Second Amendment, and here's just another example where my opponent says, I've got a gun, and I'm not talking. The reason he's not talking about it is because Arizonans care about their Second Amendment constitutional rights. And should he get elected, this will switch the Senate majority, and they will be able to ram through the most radical anti-Second Amendment agenda. And he's been leading the charge over the last 10 years, supporting the most extreme left-wing elements of his party, the Frankenstein he created.
Senator,
we're now leading the effort to take away our Second Amendment rights. I'm not going to let that happen.
We only have 30 seconds left.
Yeah.
Are you against background checks for all gun sales?
I have been strengthening the background check system that we have. Oftentimes somebody is a prohibited possessor and they're not in the background check system. So I've been leading to strengthen the system that we have while ensuring that Arizonans' Second Amendment rights are protected.
All right, that's it. We have to stop it right there. Thank you, candidates, so much. It's now time for our closing statements, and we begin with Mark Kelly.
Well, thank you, everybody, for spending the time to listen to Senator McSally and to me tonight. This is a critical moment for our country and our state. And partisan politics has made this crisis worse. And partisan politics and partisan politicians are not going to get us out of it. We need independent leadership focused on solving the problems we face, like beating this virus and rebuilding our economy and lowering the cost of health care and prescription drugs. I can bring my experience as a combat pilot, an engineer, as an astronaut to the United States Senate to help solve some of these serious problems. But I can't do that without your vote. Whether you're an independent, a Republican, or a Democrat, I ask for your vote. These are serious challenges that we face. By working together as a team, we can solve these serious problems. Thank you, everybody.
And for the final closing statement, we turn now to Senator Martha McSally.
Arizonans, you'll start voting tomorrow, and this is such a consequential decision. It will decide the Senate majority. It will decide the direction of our country. And you do have a choice here. You have somebody who's been a fighter for you and will continue to be a fighter for Arizona, or a counterfeit who will enable the radical left and their agenda to be forced on it. There's a lot at stake here. I'm humbly asking for your vote. And you know what, Mark? This has been a great discussion. Thanks for everybody for the conversation here. I think Arizonans really prefer this probably to 30-second slick TV ads. So why don't we do this 3 more times in the next few weeks? We could, we could go to Green Valley, we could go to Yuma, we could go to Prescott. I'm sure the local media would support, holding these debates. Will you agree right now? Let's do 3 more of these around Arizona, because Arizonans really deserve to have this conversation candidate to candidate about what's at stake.
I'm really looking forward to next week, I think, on Univision.
Will you agree to 3 more?
That'll be an interesting conversation. Thank you.
All right. Well, that kind of proves my point, Arizona.
All right. That is it for this election 2020 debate for the U.S. Senate, brought to you by Arizona Citizens Clean.
Oh man. Hello, Alex.
Hey.
While you set up, I'm just going to do a couple shout outs to our chat room. Our producer Dorsey is sleeping because it's New York, it's very late, and he does a morning show. So I'm just going to give us a couple of shout outs because I've been manually doing it. So thanks to everybody in the chat who's been keeping it alive. First off, and this is in no particular order because my notes are very messy, so I apologize if it hasn't been the cleanest. Delana, I love the Machine Gun Kelly reference. That was awesome. Call him Machine Gun Kelly. Very funny. Eufio, one of our favorites in the chat, threw in a lot of comments about healthcare polling better as an issue when it comes to these nuanced debates around gun reform, because it got very murky. We'll get to that in a second. And how McSally has no problem funding the police, but does not want to fund mental health and education, of course. Jess, thank you for the love. Trump, so McSally was distancing herself from Trump, and perhaps that's because of a directive with her positioning on the stimulus, and that Trump pissed her off. Good reference there. Zachary Fluke, thank you for the love. Michael Anton Liu, thank you for the love. And Medicare for All, of course. Lena, yes, left is best. Thanks for the love. Lourdes, thanks for the love. That guy, thank you for the love. Vinny, I can't read my handwriting. I'm going to say Vinny. We do not need conservative activists, judges. And Carlos, thanks for the love. I hope I didn't miss anybody. These are my horrible, horrible notes. So I have 5 pages worth of notes. Alex Kack is a community organizer, also known as the green shirt guy. I asked him to wear the green shirt because you have to, and it's looking a little worn down, Alex.
Oh, there's like permanent, I think there's beer stains in it at this point.
Before the famous moment or after?
Oh, definitely after. Look, it's been a rough year, okay?
It's been a rough year, exactly. I've worn this dress like 4 days in a row. I hear you. All right, so the debate just finished up between Mark Kelly and astronaut Mark Kelly. He is the spouse of former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords from Arizona, for the youngins here who may not know. And he was debating Senator Martha McSally, who, strangely enough, was a congresswoman in the same district that Gabrielle Giffords served. Sort of the ricochet of events that happened after Gabrielle Giffords was shot in 2011 by a crazy person, sort of stemming out of the right-wing explosion, the far right-wing explosion that occurred around the Tea Party. So Alex, you live in Tucson, and I just, let's just, before we get into all the details, who do you think won the debate?
I mean, it's always hard to pick winners and losers in these things, candidly, but yeah. It definitely seemed like Kelly had the better presentation until right there at the end, right? Of that desperate gotcha moment from McSally of challenging him to 3 more debates.
Oh my God.
And the obvious thing to do is to bring up the fact that there is one on the books and then just say yes to 2 more.
Yeah.
Call her a liar and then say, but I'll anywhere, anytime. And his inability to do that just ended it on the weakest possible note.
Well, he mentioned Univision though. What was the Univision thing?
That's a forum. So that's what I was saying.
Got it.
Say the next one. As you know, there's already one next week, but I'll do 2 more with you if that's what you really want. That would have been the obvious thing to do. And I have no idea, other than just clearly he wanted to get off that stage and not do this anymore.
Well, I think the one thing that was It's interesting about that is, and I said this at the top of the show, that, Arizonans, 80% of Arizonans vote early. So they vote before Election Day. And that's in multiple different ways. And Alex, you can, if you want to explain more about that, I definitely defer to you. But it doesn't just mean vote by mail. You can show up in person at their site. So the debate is happening now. If she is, it's October 6th. There's 28 days until the election. What does she want? 16 debates? I mean, it's not like everybody's watching. It's a small audience.
Yeah. Well, and the truth is, I mean, you mentioned we do have a county by county. We've got a variety of ways to vote early in Arizona, but the vast majority of that is mail-in ballots, and that's way before the pandemic. Ballots drop here in, I think, 6 days. They're going to be in people's hands. And when we're doing elections here, the way we forecast them, there are 2 times when those mail-in ballots are getting delivered or sent back. Right after they hit people's mailboxes, that the early birds, they fill them out, they turn them back around a day, 2 days later, and then the people who wait till the last possible day. Either way, though, if you're trying to schedule 3 more debates with one that's already on the books next week, 2 of those debates are going to happen after the majority of people have already voted in this thing. So, I mean, she doesn't want 3 more debates. Tonight didn't go well for her. That was not a pleasurable experience for Martha McSally. She just wanted, that was her desperate Hail Mary, of it's her I got you moment.
That's the word that I got from there. We can get into the details of a little bit, after this, but desperation was the sense that I got, that she was throwing everything against the wall. Half the time I didn't really understand what her strategy was. And I think part of that, and I said this at the top, was I don't really understand, she wasn't elected. For those of you who are just tuning in or tuned in late, she wasn't elected. She was appointed by Doug Ducey, the governor, after Senator McCain died. And she lost in a race against Kyrsten Sinema. And of course, she represented a swing district in Arizona. And when she ran in Arizona, in Tucson, she was a little bit more moderate. And on stage tonight, I was like, sometimes she was a little Q, sometimes she was a little more centrist. I don't think she was necessarily like shooting, all the conversation around shooting and her military service. She wasn't really shooting with aim. And I think some of that is because she actually doesn't have the space right now to make up. There's literally no voting population that exists for her to win. Am I wrong?
No, and I mean, you're not wrong at all. I mean, and this is a larger Republican Party issue, but it's going to be front and center in Arizona. The truth is that the Republican coalition from Nixon till 2016 was this devil's agreement between the worst and craziest people on the fringes of society and these capitalist business interests that were happy to exploit them to keep pushing kind of a dead economic ideology that no one else wanted. That's the only way they were able to get these Republican candidates through at the state level or in the White House. Trump blew that up because Trump was that final nail in the coffin that leaned all into one direction of just conspiracy theory and hate, right? When you get into an electorate like Arizona, we have more than our fair share of loons in the electorate. That's... Look,
yeah, I was at the rally this weekend. I stumbled upon, let me be very clear, I didn't look for it. It showed up across the street from the brunch place I was going to and disrupted it. Yeah, and it forced me to be an activist instead of going to brunch. It was a real problem.
I mean, my viral fame is
okay,
to the fact that there are loons in the electorate here.
Wait, but I didn't set that up. Can we just touch on that for a second?
We can.
All right. So I've been being a bad. So Alex, while I find the actual article, tell us a little bit about what you were doing that day when you went viral for wearing a green shirt.
So I was working on a campaign, as one does, in Tucson, which is called Tucson Families Free and Together, and we were trying to pass sanctuary city measures within the city at the ballot line. So it would have been the first time that the voters of a city, not elected officials, had chosen to put these types of protections in place. Unfortunately, we didn't win, but before that, during a city council meeting on our ballot initiative, some people from Phoenix, from a far-right hate group based in Phoenix, decided to drive down and like crash the city council meeting. And they also had like no idea what they were talking about. Like they didn't realize this was like something that was like going to be up for a vote in November. They were just like, they thought the mayor was like forcing it in some like, as like some dictator down the city, you know? So they're like screaming at him. He was actually publicly like on their side on the issue, like against this provision passing. So like the whole thing was just like beyond nuts.
I mean, you went so viral. Because I remember when you started going, I saw these people from Arizona that I knew giving commentary about you, and I'm like, what? Oh my God, this is like this is a Bernie supported leftist. And like, I'm seeing centrist Republicans, centrist, I mean, I'm sure like our favorite MSNBC commentators were commenting on it, but it was a great moment. It was a really good moment. So yeah, the loons exist. We know it. They're really loud. But how much of the voting population are they in the Republican Party? And I mean, it seemed like tonight, Martha McSally seemed beholden to them, but I mean, is she really?
I think it's all she has left is the problem. I think that Trump at the top of the ticket has cut in this state, especially with the continued attacks on John McCain, the kind of beef that he had with Jeff Flake. Like it left this kind of vacuum that if you were on the center right, chances are you're either just like sitting the election out or you're voting Democratic at this point. And that seems to be kind of the broad consensus. That means that McSally has to like try to thread a really difficult needle because the people who have funded her political career don't want crazy. They don't want overtly racist. And there's actually a recording from the last time she ran for office of one of her big donors kind of grilling her about leaning into the Trumpism too much.
Wow.
And she got like secretly recorded and she was like, well, he'll run against me, you know, and then we'll just lose the seat. But she has no real base anymore. And I think we saw that tonight. You know, we saw her go real heavy, like trying to just so inauthentically pretend to be Trump with the goofy nicknames and I mean, what was that? There's China. How many times did she say, I'm your girl or China?
and counterfeit Kelly. I mean, okay, I get like you repeat a message over and over and it sticks in people's brains, but it's not like Mark Kelly has exhibited those things. And the attack ads you see right now are very much about how it is focused on China. It's about how Mark Kelly, you know, it really is like a stretch that he made all this money, you know, overseas. And when you really start to break it down, and we can criticize Mark Kelly in a second because he's no perfect Democrat either. But when you break it down, it's like he started a business, he took investment, like I don't know how many people in the Republican Party do, and how many Democrats do too. And I think that when a business-minded Arizonan hears these attacks, they think, well, I've taken investors too. And then she attached it to some sort of, like, you went to space and you carried a Chinese banner, and then the Chinese government sent you on a propaganda trip. Okay, Martha, I'd like to see how many trips you've been on, because every single lawmaker in Washington has been invited on foreign trips. You know, sometimes there's extreme attachments associated with them, and sometimes it's like, take a tour of our country, meet our leaders, because they need to have that kind of dialogue. It just seemed, as you said, desperate. And I don't know how much of that is actually going to, like, what was curious to me was, where is the strategy? Where is the China vote? Like, who is this mystical China voter that is like, well, now that I know that he is affiliated with China, I am done. I'm not voting for him.
Well, and yeah, I mean, it's literally ratcheting up a new Cold War, or at least pretending that we're already in the middle of one,
right?
To try to win an election, right? But like, let's cut to like the meat of what she said. There's at one point she said, "I don't question your patriotism. I'm questioning your judgment and whether you're compromised because of your business deals."
Right.
So we're talking about a guy who started a business, and not just any business, but like a tech business.
Exactly.
Who bought stuff and took some money from private people in China. Like, let's just be clear. That is, like, newsflash, that's every business. That's doing business in the 21st century. That's doing business since 1975, basically. So if you're going to say that someone is disqualified for running for office, well, first off, that's every Republican. That's every Republican holding office, and in fact, probably including McSally. She's got an investment portfolio. laughably absurd.
That's right. So I mean, he didn't for the most part he didn't take the bait, but I do wish he didn't respond. There's a difference between taking the bait and becoming defensive about it, but he did respond, and then he had this repetitive response, which is, I don't know where you're getting your information from. I don't know where you're going to be. And I think what he was alluding to was, oh, she's part of that conspiracy side of the Republican Party. I wish he had actually said it a little bit more explicitly, like, Martha, listen, Martha, I've known you for years. Like, you ran for Gabby's seat. We knew you in the community. It's not like we don't know you. You're from Tucson. We work in politics. You were a centrist. Some of my staffers went over, Gabrielle Giffords' staffers went over to your office. Who are you right now? Why are you resorting to these desperate tactics? I mean, these are crazy people online who are saying the most absurd things, and you're echoing their statements. And I think, because that's the game she played, and I think if he called that out, like, for instance, the Ilhan Omar part, I'm losing my mind. Okay, so there was this moment, of course, where many moments where Martha McSally originally was like, you funded the squad and these radical leftists. Of course, she's talking about the organization that is for gun reform, and they're advocating for certain gun reforms, sensible gun reforms, in their words, for all lawmakers. And so they have an endorsement list that it's everywhere from, most centrist Democrats to, more left-leaning Democrats. But she was, really doing all she could to paint him. And I think that's, of course, racist and nativist and sexist, and we can go down the list of what she was actually doing there. But does that appeal? I mean, is there a percentage of, like, the centrists who kind of secretly, they watch Fox News all day and they're like, well, that might have actually swung them?
I doubt it. I really doubt it at this point. Like, don't get me wrong. The Republican Party in Arizona, and specifically in certain parts of Arizona, has been playing, these race issues and stoking white fear for a lot longer and a lot more overtly than the Republican Party by and large in the nation was. I mean, this is where Joe Arpaio was grown.
Joe Arpaio being, of course, the sheriff who, in the early 90s, I mean, they would do specials around, I remember Bill Maher, Politically Incorrect, like the early one, did a special back when he was a little bit more left-leaning about Joe Arpaio and the cruel things he did to his inmates, like putting them in pink shorts and much worse. And, of course, he's gotten in a lot of trouble for that.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, like, this is a man who, like, tortured inmates and then also, like, took the money he was saving by not feeding them and giving them air conditioning and, like, bought a tank that didn't work with it. Like, so I mean, like Arizona has elected some crazy Republicans, sure. But I don't think, when you're talking about those people that are sitting and that are fairly moderate and are relatively rational, but they're maybe upper middle class and they're voting on pocketbook class issues, that they feel like they're a part of something, that they're a part of a wealthier group than they really are. I don't think they're sitting there and hearing Omar and, there's this crazy, like, leftist insurgency and everyone's wearing red berets going through their heads like McSally was hoping. And I mean, like, let's be honest. I mean, she tried to play Mark Kelly and paint him as basically like a South American revolutionary, which is beyond laughable.
It's like, okay, so let me give a quick shout out before I ask you about that. This is what happens when we do lives. Stephen Cost, thank you for the love. Stephen Cost says, Mark Kelly is killing this debate. McSally knows she's losing badly. McSally is a goddamn liar. Everyone out there, vote up and down the ticket. Don't let the GOP of Trump trick you. Vote for Dems, who are a little better than Republican candidates. I think that's well said, and it's a perfect segue into, well, who is Mark Kelly politically? I mean, can you give us kind of like the broad spectrum of where he stands on issues? We heard some of it tonight. There were certain moments in the chat where people fell in love with him, and then they're like, oh, man, we fell in love with you, and then you did that. But who is he?
I mean, let's take a step back from where he's at in the issues, right? Because if we were to say something, it was to say he's a moderate. And I don't even think that it's fair to just say that Kelly's a political moderate. I think we saw on the stage tonight, going back to what you were saying about the way he didn't kind of cleverly attack and spar with McSally. Like, he is a moderate person in temperament.
Personality, yeah, okay.
Like, he is, but that is political too. Those things aren't usually so separate. And he's a perfect example of that. Like, he's an embodiment of one kind of calm mindset overall. That's a positive way of spinning the fact that he and I are worlds apart on a lot of issues, to be perfectly honest. Let's break down, I think, the things that are most appealing about him, right?
Sure.
Public option for healthcare. He's been beating that drum for a while. Is it what I want? Is it Medicare for all? No, but is it a step in that direction that's substantial and is going to cover a lot of people? Yes. So a public option for healthcare, that's been one of his central campaign issues, and it's polling well.
Okay.
You know, he's doing really well with it. Obviously, the thing that he isn't really known for is being Gabby's husband. And with that said, meaning stronger and stricter gun control. He is nowhere near the kind of hawk on that issue that I think Sally tried to paint him out to be, though, despite the fact that that's kind of his central like locus point before running for office. His policies on it are still basically red flag laws, expanded background checks, closing gun show loopholes. I mean, standard fare stuff that most of everyone agrees on.
Which is very popular for those of you who don't know this. It's very popular among NRA members even. And that's why he could get away with that space there.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that if you break it away, it's rhetoric that almost every American agrees with.
Right.
I mean, there are people that are, NRA members. There are people that are members of local gun clubs of all political bents who are usually pretty okay with the idea of if you have a history of beating your wife, you shouldn't have access to firearms and things like that. There are things where it gets, I think, murkier and where we get further apart. And I think this is an important point about both of these candidates, though, is that both of them tonight, to me, felt like candidates out of time. Both, you know, McSally is desperately trying to figure out where she exists in a modern Republican Party that has shown in 2 elections now that it has no use or desire for her. She's trying to sound like this 2012 and before kind of moderate who's slightly socially conservative and trying to jive that into Trump's Republican Party, right? But the same thing is kind of true of Kelly. In a lot of his answers, he sounds like a pre-Obama Democrat.
Right. Very much so. Yep.
And even what we consider today moderate and centrist Democrats that we were railing against in the primary are usually pretty far to the left of that, just candidly.
So interesting point on that, because I've, looking at some of these key seats across the country, I'm noticing a trend here. You've got Amy McGrath versus Charles Booker. Of course, Amy McGrath running against Mitch McConnell. I mean, really I think all of the swing seats right now, in terms of the Senate, where we could win back seats, are fairly conservative Democrats. How much of this is a Chuck Schumer issue, of all people? And what he thinks, because he's from a different era, because he is a New Yorker, he's not from, is this his idea of like what he thinks a winnable Democrat looks like? Because he's just out of touch, frankly.
I mean, yeah. And there's, saying Chuck Schumer is a good way to say a whole bunch of people, but yeah, he's one of them. And I think if you've been in Arizona Democratic politics in the last 15 years, there's been a lot of this. There's been a lot of like, let's run to the center kind of uninspiring candidates who, get their lunch handed to them because they were kind of propped up by people from other states who didn't really get the electorate here. I will say that Kelly is a little different than that. If you look at McGrath had a strong primary challenger in Booker, and locally that was a divisive issue. There was people saying we should stand against her. That didn't really happen with Kelly. I mean, Kelly was obviously on a national scale, kind of an heir apparent that was pushed in there, but there weren't a lot of people, I think, at the state level who were saying, well, let's provide an alternative to that. There were enough people, I think, who even like vehemently disagreed with him. Were kind of like, well, he's not a bad guy. Let's just get out of the way and see what happens.
But they were also afraid, no? I mean, he's a tough person to fight. The story is compelling. I mean, nobody wants to run against an astronaut, and nobody wants to run against an astronaut who is the husband of a beloved congresswoman here who went through a tremendous tragedy.
No, I mean, that is kind of exactly a huge part of it. I mean, let's be honest. There's Gabby Giffords as a congresswoman was a blue dog Democrat. And there were all kinds of Democrats who were really upset with her at different times about different issues, representing the swingiest of swing districts, right? But she did stick to her guns on issues. She was incredibly receptive on, kind of community issues and on constituent outreach and the things that are really easy to forget about when you're talking about congressmen and women. People forget how much of an impact that has on the reputation of these people.
Right.
And those offices can do so much more than just legislate or push ideology. Her office wasn't a bad example of showing what it can do in the community. And of course, that's what happened, right? She got shot at a Congress on your corner. She was outside of a grocery store in her district, just meeting people and hearing their issues. And on a hot Arizona day, that's not always the funnest activity. But she did those, and she did them a lot. So she had a reputation, and by virtue of association, Kelly has that same reputation. That's not something that you want to run against. I don't care if you're running in a primary or a general. You don't want to be the person running against the person that, even if you disagree with them, you can't help but kind of like being around them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So he came out today and he said, after McSally called it the bad Green Deal. Is that what she kept calling it?
The green bad deal.
Yeah.
I think at one point she said green blue deal, or like stumbled over it.
See, I mean, obviously it was bad because she said it 19 times and I still couldn't remember it. Yes. And then Kelly had to clarify that he was against it, which I don't really understand how the Green New Deal, I mean, maybe it's just association with the squad, but it seems like we're past a point where, I mean, if climate change, well, there was a poll that was cited where I think 70% of Arizonans think that we have to deal, that they have to deal with climate change. Yeah, 70% of Arizonans, climate change needs to be a priority, and that's with the looming crisis with water, which has been an issue that people have been talking about since the 70s. But there's overdevelopment in Arizona, for those of you who don't know. Phoenix, I believe, is the 5th largest city in the country. A lot of overdevelopment, and the water supply out west is it's a crisis, a major crisis.
Doesn't exist. The water supply in Arizona doesn't exist. Yeah,
it's literally that. And then of course there's forest fire, wildfires that have ravaged the entire West for a while. Just to mention a few things. So I don't understand how the Green New Deal cannot be like why can't you just make a case? Why can't you just say, listen, we have a lot of differences between the squad and us, but one thing we do agree on is that climate change is an impending issue. And he doubled down and was like, well, I believe in fossil fuels, and there was no solution presented, and that I think is what's concerning.
So I think there's 2 points to that, right? Which is, one is a broader, I think, conversation about why do these Democrats keep backing away from the Green New Deal or any of these kind of slogan out policies that, I mean, Biden's a great example of this, right? What the Unity Task Force put together is like, it's not what we said in the Green New Deal, but it's like, it's actually a substantial climate plan. Yeah. And he could have easily just reappropriated it. He could have just owned it and just been like, this is just the Biden Green New Deal. We're no jobs guarantee, but we're going to spend a bunch of money, Like, he could have easily done that. That's my best Delaware impression. But
come on, man. Come on. Shut, man. What are you saying?
That jobs guarantees malarkey, okay? But we're going to stop the fires. We're going to pay people to stop the fires.
Would you shut up?
Yeah. But this is an issue that Democrats have in general, especially moderate Democrats, right? Because they allow the right to just run win and run the language war. And this goes back to the New Deal and all of that. They allow the right wing to make things sound scarier than they are, and to take words that describe positions that sometimes they hold, and they just back away from it.
That's right.
And I mean, you saw this liberal, right? That's the dirty word. And you saw McSally use it over and over and over again, like it was an episode of The West Wing from 2001. It's this liberal takeover of this and that, which first off, I don't think that word scares even conservatives anymore. We're in a post Bernie Sanders, like Democratic Socialist era. It's just, it's toothless.
Okay, so there's another thing.
Democrats still duck from it. Well, my point is that Democrats still duck from the word liberal, like reflexively, like they're being punched, instead of just saying, yeah, but this is what that means.
Right.
Okay.
I mean,
calm down.
Just become an explainer. Like, Doesn't mean you own. Just say, because what happens is they get tense and then they start to pivot, and then it's an energy that they put out. And so, in the most basic form of debate training that I could give them from my college debate years is just exude confidence, right? And beyond that, I've done a lot of television debate. I should probably lead with that one, not with my high school and college debate days. But that was more fun, in my opinion.
Well, also, I mean,
weren't as serious.
That might be the level that a lot of political candidates need to start with.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. The debates that we have seen across the nation this last year have not exactly been Toastmasters.
Yeah.
So,
That's correct. So there's the point. Like, if someone goes after you, defend. I mean, even Biden was doing it, and he should know better. He got into defensive mode over and over. He was clearly frustrated. Doesn't mean that he didn't win. I know what happened with the debate with Trump, but there are things you don't have to respond to every attack. If anything, if they're trying to bait you, you pivot, and then you go back to them. It's like debate 101. You stay confident, you stay smooth, go. Anyways, when she comes at him with the Green New Deal, you say, "Listen, McSally, I'm in the camp of we believe in science. We see the energy costs in this country right now. We see what's happening with the wildfires. This isn't a partisan issue. This isn't like what President Trump said was just like a little bit of tinders and some leaves. This is a real crisis. And if you don't have the answers, then I'm on the side of the folks who want to deal with this because their properties are at risk, because their water's at risk, their air's, or whatever it is. Like, you just own it. And I'm... For the amount of money that is being spent on this race, and a lot of these races, it is shocking to me that some of the most basic components of running for office have not been prioritized. I mean, this is what happened with Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, a week before the election, a reporter asked her, this is in the book Shattered, asked her, "So why are you running for president?" And she did not have an answer. First thing you learn, why are you running for office? Yeah. You have an answer. So, okay, so I have a couple things I want to go through with you real quick.
Read your notes, and I'll say. But I mean, this is kind of been one of Kelly's issues, and it's like I actually praised him to someone about this the other day on how far he had come in this election cycle. I was at an event with him last fall, watching him speak to a crowd, and it was a lot rougher. And to be fair, he's a first-time candidate. He's not a polished guy. He's never been put through this before. And you're talking about like when you teach a kid to swim and throw him into the deep end, like this is the most exaggerated version of that in a political sense you could probably find. But at the same time, for all the progress he's made and how impressed I was like 5 days ago, I think tonight we saw a lot of ways where it was still falling apart. At the end of the day, Kelly was able to clearly articulate positions and which direction he would vote on things, but he wasn't, when pressed on them, necessarily capable of explaining the mechanisms on how to enact them. How would you pay for these things? How would you whip the votes to do this? That was still kind of out of his grasp. Now, to be fair, even that as a criticism was still light years ahead of whatever the hell was going on with McSally tonight. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a lot of room where even if she couldn't take advantage of it on the stage tonight, one of her consultants might be able to in the next couple of days.
That's right. And that's an important thing to keep in mind here is this is the moment. I mean, voting is going on for 28 days, of course, but a consultant, I mean, one of the reasons why she wanted to bait him was to get that soundbite where they can cut an ad, do a mailer, with enough runway to send those mailers out, do the proper attack that just might cut into. But the problem is I don't think it's doable. I mean, the only thing that confused me, and we'll get to two issues that I think were really, really important, and specifically for Arizonans, but Trump right now, if you're looking at the polls, is actually neck and neck with Biden. So I don't understand why she was using Trump's rhetoric in a lot of, but she was actually distancing herself from Trump, and that to me is confusing. Like, is there just a group of Trump voters that are just completely against McSally, and she's trying to win over some more centrist voters? Like, it comes down to who is her base, what is she doing, what's her path, what's her strategy. Just leaving that out there. All right, so Medicare for all. The public option, you alluded to it. I was having flashbacks, as I'm sure a lot of the chat was. to the presidential debates and how you gonna pay for it, how you gonna literally the difference between then and now is potentially millions of Americans not having health insurance because it's tied to their employment, showing, of course, the problems that we have with our current system of Obamacare. And there was a great opportunity for Mark Kelly to come in, and I just feel like it fell flat. But
it's weird to me looking back at that earlier tonight and seeing that almost all of his strongest and weakest moments were somehow in that healthcare discussion, like all at the same time. I felt like he hit his best points and by just being clear up front about what he wanted to do and not backing away from that. But he fumbled by just not being able to explain why it's so vitally important right now.
Right.
And I think there's an interesting thing with Kelly when you're talking about Medicare for all, because he's not campaigned on that. He has distanced himself from it. He is this public option in addition to the ACA guy, right? I mean, he is as center left as you can get on the issue. But at the same time, and I think we saw this tonight quite a bit, I think if you get a freshman senator with no political experience who, he is one of these kind of moralistic grandstanders, right? And that's almost a positive thing for me to say. It sounds like I'm kind of insulting him, but I'm almost trying to say it in a positive way. I think that there's room for him to be carried with the party.
Interesting.
On a number of these issues.
Because he's a freshman and he wants to have a long career, and if the country is moving that way, is that what you're saying?
I think he's a whippable vote. I think he's in there, he's won the election, and we get enough progressive senators in there to put in some type of single payer plan. I don't see him necessarily being a no vote on it in the way that like Munchin, for example, like would be. Like there are Democrats who
or Sinema. How do we know Sinema? I mean,
Sinema is a different question because I have no idea what Sinema will do. I work in Arizona politics, and I'll just come out and say that right now. On no vote ever have I been like, I know how Sinema's going to vote on that. And that goes back to her Prada socialist days in the State House. Like, I mean, Kristen Sinema is not. Yeah. It's like, shuffling cards and picking one off the top. I don't know what she's going to do on any given issue.
It's reassuring. Wow, exciting there. All right, so before we wrap up, I have one more question, and that is the border security issues, because, this is an issue that gets played out in the press nationally extensively, and I feel like it was very similar to the defund the police conversation, which also upset me. They were talking about a lot of things that are very different. Having a border wall, which already exists, but funding a border wall, McSally wasn't very clear about like what the border wall is for. Is it to block the cartel, which isn't even used? Like they're not carrying over the border really. They've got tunnels and helicopters and
they go
plane
through ports
systems.
Of entry half the time. Let's just be honest.
Let's be honest. And there's other deals happening there. Or is it about people who are coming over, the undocumented people, which of course we know they're not coming over the border for a lot of reasons, the economy, being held up in different parts of the country right now. And of course, we've got our lovely Stephen Miller program that has dissuaded a lot of folks from coming over the border. So I'm just curious, first off, what the fight is over. And second, why Mark Kelly seemed to defend it.
So this is where you're gonna Kelly is not. I'm not even gonna try to play a line here and be like I'm a Democrat who's trying to push people to vote for Kelly.
That's why I had you on.
Yeah. So my biggest disagreements with Kelly are all around immigration. My biggest disagreements with every Democrat, including our furthest left ones, are on immigration. So I worked on that Sanctuary City campaign. We touched on that earlier today. I mean, Kelly wrote an op-ed, was pretty ill-advised against us, and took it out of the paper. I said earlier, Kelly sounds like a Democrat from the mid-2000s or earlier, and that was what he was saying then was pretty much the standard line for all Democrats,
right?
At that time on immigration. Well, we need to redo the system, but having people come here on an undocumented basis undercuts wages. So let's create not a wall, but a technological barrier of surveillance, which is, I don't know, maybe more ghastly. It's slightly less race baity than a wall, but it's It's not good policy. It's crazy expensive, and the one thing I'll give McSally in this debate, the one and only thing, is she was right for half a sentence. She said we need to get to the root cause of our immigration problem. Now, her diagnosis of that root cause is racist and horrible, and not at all accurate. But she is right that if you want to solve the immigration issue, you need to get to the root cause. And unfortunately, Arizona is faced with a Senate election again, where we have two candidates who don't seem to know what that root cause is. And that's unfortunate because McSally kept talking about those ranchers in southern Arizona.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, if you went and asked one of them, they could tell you what the root cause is. I live in southern Arizona.
So what would you advise Mark Kelly? How would you advise him to express what the root cause is?
I mean, it's complicated. Don't get me wrong, because Arizona is not one cohesive state in the way that much of the rest of this country is. Our electorate is radically different from one part of it to another, and the living experience of being here is. In my neck of the woods, we don't want any wall. We don't want any. I don't.
This is in Tucson, which is 45 minutes
south.
from the border.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we don't. It's just continuous land at that point, you know. It is, and
why? I mean, just playing devil, trying to explain it to a population that may not understand the complexities in Arizona. Why don't you want a wall? Why don't people south to Midtown and down to the border not want a wall, including ranchers?
You have numerous issues, frankly. I mean, one, you're talking about there's a lot of private property along literally on the border. You have protected lands on the border. You have environmental issues here. So you're talking about to build this wall, and we've already seen it. And again, this goes for the surveillance kind of police state model of a wall too, right? You're going to have to take people's land that they've lived on, sometimes for multiple generations.
Yeah.
You need to build through it. And we're seeing those issues right now. You're also talking about indigenous land.
Right.
That we're seeing the issue between tribal governments and the federal government right now about this. You're talking about, frankly, also some of that land can't physically sustain that wall. And then you're talking about the inhumanity of keeping people out and keeping other people in and trying to make these decisions for people completely arbitrarily and with no context to who they are or what they want to do or just letting them live their lives. I mean, it's just, there's so many myriad complexities, and that's just looking at kind of the big, broad moral issues why. But let's get down to like the nitty gritty that I think even people on the right can understand when you explain it to them. It's good for the economy to have people coming over here, either to live here or to visit here. And Southern Arizona as a whole, we often think of like white American tourists going and partying and tearing up beaches in Mexico, which unfortunately too often happens. But there are a lot of people, I live here every December, who come over spending their money on American goods, taking them back, on locally made things. And that's it almost, I think to most Americans and other places sounds like a role reversal, but there is so much just commerce that happens on each side of the border from people that live on the other side of it that sustains the towns and cities and the people that live there. That's why some of these people move there in the first place. Yeah. Putting more restrictions on that of any kind is absolutely hurting working people on both sides of the border. That's not helping this issue.
I had you know, I spent a lot of time in Tucson. I have a friend who owns business on the border, one of the smaller border towns, and they created a point of entry there. They changed the system for the point of entry. This is maybe a decade ago, in which suddenly the lines got longer. And what happened was folks used to pass through. They lived on one side of the border city versus the other, and they go back and forth, and they'd see family, and they'd go shopping on one side, they have dinner on the other, et cetera, et cetera. It was like they lived on two sides of, in some cases, the same name. The city is the same name, and some it's not. And in this one town, the entire American side, when they set that point of entry up and they changed the rules to get in, this is under Obama, the entire town became a ghost town because they weren't able to sustain, like you just said. I mean, I haven't thought about that in a decade since he told me that story. And then I went down there and saw it. And we're talking about warehouses, we're talking about businesses, I mean, this is like real economy here. Yeah. And that doesn't service, like you said, it's not these are, I think, actually probably more conservative leaning people too. So.
And oftentimes it is. But, the truth is the immigration argument has never played well in Southern Arizona. Not this immigration hawk argument. It just hasn't.
Interesting.
And, the part of Arizona that's sold in is Maricopa County, Phoenix Metro.
Phoenix.
And the surrounding kind of suburban parts of it. And that's, again, Joe Arpaio land. That's been kind of the discrepancy, right? Why does Arizona consistently go red in these elections statewide? And when you look at the electoral map, it's basically 2 blocks of blue with a thick red strip through the center of it. I think where you saw McSally panicking tonight, to tie this all back around to that debate, though, is if you look at the most recent poll, she and Trump are down in Maricopa County, which is where the Phoenix suburbs and Phoenix itself reside. There is no hope of any Republican winning statewide here without
winning those
overwhelming numbers in the Phoenix suburbs.
And when we talk about the suburbs, so Phoenix is a huge, Maricopa County is huge. Phoenix, the city, is more Democratic leaning, but there are some suburbs that are more Latino, and some that are, a little bit more upper middle class, to say the least, like Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, etc. Which ones are you looking at right now?
So Phoenix is kind of an interesting, ball of wax if you want to look at how it's cut up. Because when we say Phoenix, right, you're hitting on that right there. When people say Phoenix and they're not like living in Phoenix, what they're referring to is 23, I think it is at last count, different municipalities. 23 different cities with their own city councils, often with their own police forces, different tax rates, and just radically different political opinions, which is why you'll suddenly see rail transit just abruptly end when you cross one street there, right, in a way that makes no sense. The truth is, Phoenix proper, which is just Phoenix, capital P, has become pretty solidly blue, with a couple of wealthy enclaves being an exception. The entire surrounding area is kind of a hodgepodge, though. I grew up in Glendale, which is the West Valley, which is historically super working class, and much of it is primarily Latino. One of our favorite shared state representatives represents that area.
Area Gazzetta, let's give him a shout out. Bernie Kratt.
Yeah, let's give him a shout out.
Co-chair of Arizona Bernie campaign.
He represents part of the West Valley. The West Valley also elects some of the farthest right Republicans, sitting on a border with each other that you would walk in 5 minutes. So the way these lines are cut arbitrarily to determine what is and what isn't a different part of Phoenix does affect these elections quite a bit. And it's really difficult when you start looking at breaking it down to precincts and legislative districts to say, well, this is outside of just central Roosevelt Row, hipster downtown Phoenix, that anything out there is not.
And of course, the Republican, so just as we tie up, this is a party, the Republican Party, the Goldwater Party, right? This was a very different Republican Party, but what the Koch brothers were able to do so well is find a way to invest in some of these more right-wing folks who took over seats in legislature, and of course, gerrymandered the hell out of Arizona. And so there is this illusion that Arizona is more right-wing, and I think what you've referred to is it's a different type of Republican Party, a different type of thinking. And also, I think, on the same note, there's Chuck Schumer's illusion of what he thinks Democrats are in Arizona, and that couldn't be further from the truth. It's an extremely Latino state. There's a lot of young people in the state, and as a result, we saw how Bernie Sanders has his message really, if he was given the opportunity, if the election basically hadn't been tied up at that point, he probably would have done very well in Arizona as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. Look, the truth is, if you want to look at the evolution of the Republican Party, the investments that outside groups made in Arizona was a roadmap that led to Trump nationally. I think the roadmap to beat that back properly is at work right now at the grassroots in Arizona. When you see strong progressive candidates up and down this state, and I'm talking actual progressives, not just moderate center-left Democrats like we saw tonight, but real progressives all over the ballot. beating incumbent Democrats, beating their handpicked heirs in primaries, and polling at levels that they're going to walk through their general election.
That's awesome. That's
how we win back the country. That's how we win back the country, though.
We know how we do this. It's not rocket science. It's whether or not Democrats are seeing the writing on the wall and are willing to just say no, maybe to a little bit of insurance money. Alex Kack, give me a group that folks can go to if they want to learn more about Arizona or help out in any way, because this is a swing state. I mean, Arizona is a swing state this election. It turned blue in 2006, back when I worked in AZ politics way back in the day. There's an opportunity again, and there are other hot spots like this around the country that we'll be focusing on. But if folks want to check something out, where should they go?
Oh, I mean, God, there's a million different groups. I guess that depends on your political persuasion. If you're looking farther
progressives,
left, yeah. If you're looking farther left, a group that is very near and dear to my heart is the People's Defense Initiative, which is some of my closest friends in the world, and I know they're actively recruiting volunteers, and I believe some of it can even be done remotely. So reach out to them about things you can do to help. There are also a ton of progressive down ballot campaigns. If you want something you can do in an afternoon where you don't have to interact with a bunch of other people, just honestly reach out to me. You can cold call me on like Twitter or Instagram or something. DM me. It's open. Tell me what issues are important to you. I'll direct you to the farthest left candidate I know that you can spend 2 hours calling or phone banking for.
That's fantastic. All right, People's Defense Initiative, Alex Kack, at Alex_KACK, look his name up on the screen. I'll put it down on here on the chat, and hope to have you back on soon. We can talk more.
I'm doing nothing for the next year apparently, so let me know.
I think we're all kind of stuck inside for a bit. All right, be healthy, be well, and thank you to everybody for tuning in. This was a lot of fun. Like I said, we're going to be doing more of these debates. Actually, tomorrow night, come check us out back on here. We are going to do live analysis of the Kamala Harris Mike Pence debate, plexiglass included. Hopefully that is back here on the Nomiki Show. And of course, our regular show airs 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific tomorrow. We have an amazing show, so make sure to check it out. It's late on the East Coast. Go get some rest. And I am hungry. I'm going to go have some dinner now. All right. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.